coming from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
Hello, wackos. Welcome to Without a Country. I am your host, Corinne Fisher. Welcome to the show. If you've never seen this show before, this is Without a Country. We go over the news of the week, both nationally, internationally, and municipal. My specific favorite. From the perspective of the right and the left, we find the truth in the middle. We're a show big on fact checking and critical thinking. I am left-leaning, pretty left-leaning, full disclosure, but hopefully not. I haven't lost, my mind yet. Some might say, but I think not politically. And yeah, if you want to send me an email or your opinion on something, keep it peaceful, but it's withoutaCountrypodcast@gmail.com. I am a stand-up comedian, a podcaster, politically involved. Specifically right now, I'm doing a lot of work with Disrupt in New York City, which is the left's response to Turning Point USA. And I also ran for mayor in 2025 against, I didn't win, but, Zohran Mamdani did win. And now I do a lot of work, supporting things that he is trying to work on in the city. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. We are in an independent show, but if you want to help to fund the work that we're doing here, you can always subscribe to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/withoutaCountry, and you can become a member for as little as $6 a month. And what those dollars do is it helps to buy subscriptions to news outlets that we want to keep supporting their journalism. And it also pays all the wonderful people who work on this show. We got Mike, we got Crystal, we got sometimes AJ. And and it just keeps everything moving and grooving. And you get an additional bonus news story every single week with that subscription. So thank you all for being here. All hail to our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi. If that scares you, that's just a tier of the Patreon. So do not be alarmed. This is not a dictatorship. It is certainly a democracy. And speaking of democracy, it was a very big week. A lot of primaries happened yesterday, specifically the primaries in New York City. Where I live, we have closed primaries in New York City, which means that you have to be registered with a specific party to vote in the primaries. I was not I was, independent for a long time, but I registered as a Democrat. Number one, because I was running for office and I wanted to run on the Democratic ticket, and then secondly, because I think it is important for me to have voting power in the primaries. So I am a registered Democrat. I do think it would be. I don't know if I'm sure people have done this before. I'm not, I'm not the first person to think of this, but, ideally, I do think it would almost be better for people who are Democrats to be registered Republicans in New York so that we could vote in the Republican primaries. But then not good moving forward when the record shows that you are a registered Republican. I feel like people wouldn't believe it was merely strategic, but it was a huge day, specifically for none other than New York City's Mayor Zohran Mamdani. And, we talk a lot about political endorsements on this show, mostly because I think that's like a lot of pushback that I got after I conceded my mayoral race was that I did not endorse a candidate, more than did not endorse. I specifically did not endorse Zohran Mamdani, but it wasn't, had I endorsed anyone, it would have been him. But I don't, after running for office, and I had this feeling before, but now I feel it even more strongly. I just think political endorsements are really a self-serving stepping stone for elected officials. And, the coverage that you see coming out of New York City, specifically for Zohran Mamdani, and, a little bit before yesterday and certainly after, is that the fact that he endorsed 3 candidates that won, like, yeah, it's good for, New York if you like their policies, and it is good for the DSA, certainly. But more than anything, it's good for Zohran Mamdani. And as a constituent in New York City, I know I've met Claire Valdez. I've met and worked with and debated against Brad Lander, and Brad Lander was running for a congressional seat in my district. So even though he physically runs away from me when he sees me in the streets, because of me running against him for mayor, I did still cast my vote for him because I do feel like he is the better choice. I think people love Brad Lander. When he speaks, it literally makes my skin crawl. I just think he is so AI created politician, the weird, and I know I have a weird cadence in my voice too, but like, I wish I could do an impression of he'd be like, when I think about New York City, I think about things that we should do. And I think that the average New Yorker just wants to be represented. It's very fucking weird. I don't think he has star power, but in a congressional seat, it's I think it's less important than that you have star power than as mayor of New York City, which he was also running for. A mayor is a role that needs star power, especially the mayor of New York City. A congressional seat, I think it certainly helps if you have star power. That's, a big part of the reason behind the success of people like AOC, of Jasmine Crockett for a couple of years until the entire party turned on her. And or not even the entire party. I think like more leftist people turned on her because of the AIPAC connection. Of course, everything is about AIPAC right now, AIPAC and Israel. And it's interesting. Whereas the incumbent in this district for Congress, Dan Goldman, he's a taller, better looking, kind of more camera friendly guy. So I thought it was very interesting that Brad Lander beat him. But in these elections that are district-wide as opposed to city-wide, it really is so much more about your relationship with the constituents in the specific district. You have to do a lot of boots on the ground work in your specific community to win roles like that. Even though Congress obviously is this national seat, it's really about just who are in the boroughs and the communities that you're representing, and do they feel like you are going to advocate that for them? Do they know you? And that's certainly, I've never seen Dan Goldman walking around, and I know what he looks like, even though I've never met him in person. I do see Brad Lander walking around quite a bit. So he is kind of doing the work that I think needs to be done to run an office locally. We'll talk a lot about this more later in the show, only because not because it's New York specific. If it was just New York specific, I wouldn't spend too much time on it. But I think it really does set the tone for what we might be seeing in 2028. And obviously, there are a lot of, I believe I read an article that was like 67 of the 100 mayors of major cities in the United States are now folks on the left, right? And I think that is, and we see a lot of these DSA candidates getting pushed. There's another important election for a DSA candidate happening in Colorado very soon that the DSA is pushing everyone behind. So I think this is interesting to track. But yeah, definitely really enhances the power of Zohran Mamdani. And it's interesting because, as we talked about, I believe last week, he immediately after he won, Chiose wanted to challenge Hakeem Jeffries, and Zohran upset a lot of people by saying, no, I'm not going to endorse you in that quest. We have to, take some time to work on this office we just won, which is, my mayoral office, my mayoral seat. And then kind of very quickly changed his tune and endorsed Brad Lander, who, I mean, he owed Brad Lander for for winning mayor of New York City. So he needed to do something for him. We knew that was coming. And I think, Brad is more than well suited to represent us in Congress. And then, for the former controller of New York City. And then secondly, he endorsed, there's Claire Valdez, and she won. Again, I've met her. I did a video with her that's on my Instagram. She had just won assembly member and then very quickly pivoted and ran for Congress. And, she won her primary. And then also Darializa Chevalier. And that is possibly the most interesting or most surprising race of yesterday. Like, we kind of definitely knew that Brad Lander was going to win. He was polling in a way that was absolutely destroying Dan Goldman. Darializa is interesting because she's a community organizer, and she seemingly came out of nowhere. She's 32. People are comparing her win to AOC's win against Crowley years ago. There's a documentary on, I believe it's still running on Netflix if you're interested in it. What is it? It's Bring Down the House or something. Knock Down the House. It's from 2019. Very, very interesting. Highly recommend that if you're thinking of running for office, especially Congress, but for any office. And, and keep in mind, like, they're making it seem like she came out of nowhere. She had a ton of support behind the scenes from organizations and stuff, but she still was a first-time candidate and, a developmental client, as I like to say. And Chevalier, she won against this incumbent. I think the incumbent, did himself in. It's Esplat, I believe is how you say it. Sorry if I'm butchering Spanish words. I butcher a lot of English words as well. But I think he did himself in a little bit because a lot of people who were supporting him were kind of like harassing Chevalier, were following her around, a couple days ago. Just with cameras in her face being like, do you believe Israel has the right to exist? And, while it's true, I think a lot of races right now have been boiled down to this single issue, which is, hilarious because it's something that we get down on Republicans for all the time for being like single issue voters. It also just it's not a good look to harass people, especially over coming off as someone who is like, your main thing is like that you need to support Israel and its right to exist. Like, there's just so many more things that I think people need on a day-to-day: housing, healthcare, the ability to buy a home, the protections from AI data centers being built and dirtying the water and the environment and their communities, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, like the list goes on. And not to say that the genocide in Gaza is not something we should be talking about. Obviously, a lot of people would argue some of the American needs, or many of the American needs, are not being taken care of because so much of our money is going to aid Israel that could be going to, help a lot of the things that I just listed. But it really has, so many races have kind of devolved into just that. And so many candidates who we previously loved or we previously thought were doing well or had a good chance of winning their seat are now, being ostracized because it's, been found that perhaps they got donations, maybe not directly from AIPAC, but because from some sort of like Israel group that supports Israel. And Darializa is also very interesting because, like, again, like, I'm pretty involved, obviously, in politics in New York, that albeit I don't know everyone in every district because it just doesn't work. It wouldn't even make sense to unless I was, working like in city council proper or something like that. But Darializa just really, like, Claire Valdez didn't come from nowhere. Brad Lander certainly didn't come from nowhere. But Darializa seemingly came from nowhere. And I looked into it a little bit more, and she was a staff member on Zohran Mamdani's team. his mayoral campaign team. So, and again, she had been doing a lot of like organizational political work, which is a little bit vague, but I just think it's important to look where people came from and why they might get endorsements where other people aren't getting endorsements. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I do right now want to get into enemy of the state. Our enemy of the state this week is Jimmy Fallon, everybody. It's Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon has gotten a lot of heat over the years for kind of being apolitical, for not really taking a stance on kind of anything. And unfortunately, I think sometimes like these guys who are, like Jimmy Fallon, kind of like silly gooses and silly geese and almost have this like childlike demeanor, we let it slide for them to, sit and yuck it up with people like Donald Trump, and they don't get as much pushback as other individuals get. And I don't know. I think a lot of times these silly geese type men are some of the most destructive, and certainly in the comedy scene, some of the types of people that I find to be the least trustworthy are these like silly guy. I'm just a silly guy. I just do silly stand up. Like, I'm not going to call him out by name, but there is a specific comic, male stand up comic, who I would certainly describe as having a silly goose persona, who has really blown up in a huge way, especially on Instagram over the past several years. And he reminds me so much of Jimmy Fallon, like someone who's not really going to take a political stance, but, makes moves and does things that are, and certainly has not a great reputation with female comedians. And I'm not going to accuse him of anything specific. I don't think he's committed a felony. Who the hell knows with these people? But it's just my note to like be wary of the people who are silly geese or who are apolitical nice guys. And it's funny because God bless her, I love Lisa Traeger, one of my favorite comedians. I just really like her. She fucking goes for it. And she posted a clip going after, kind of saying like, I don't speak to almost anyone at the Cellar anymore. And then she called out by name Nate Bargatze, who no one calls out because he is kind of like, oh, we all love him. He's a clean comedian. He's a very talented comedian. But she's like, yeah, a lot of people don't know this. He's a big Trumper, which isn't crazy to assess, knowing like, where he's from. The fact that he's a clean comedian, I think, is like the biggest tell that you might be a Trumper. And it just made me laugh so hard. But so I think it's like that we give people the benefit of the doubt. When we like them, they generally have an unproblematic demeanor, and they're silly. They're a nice guy, and this goes for women too. And we never hear about their politics, and they don't bother us, and they don't really they don't really challenge anything. Like, those are the same people to be wary of. I know people like Taylor Swift actually get a lot of feedback like that. That's kind of why she. Ultimately, I think felt pushed to get a little bit involved in politics, and especially like LGBTQ stuff, with her "You Need to Calm Down" video. But I also think that was quite strategic, right? Because, LGBTQ issues, meaning like gay, lesbian issues, are now pretty mainstream, where like it's not crazy on the right to be pro LGBTQ. She's not making big statements about being trans, which would now be like the more extreme leftist talking point for anything LGBTQIA. She's not making big productions about that. She's not necessarily talking a lot about, presidential elections, or she has this big platform. She's not talking out about like ICE and things like that. And so a lot of people get pushback about her, but she is like this middle of the road person that kind of people on the right and people on the left love. And because we love her and her music so much and who she is and her relationship with Travis Kelce, I think a lot of us, whether it be subconsciously or consciously, have made this decision kind of like, I don't want to dig anymore because I don't want to find out something I don't like. I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to continue liking Taylor Swift. And I think that, goes for people like Jimmy Fallon as well. And, Jimmy Fallon made a very interesting, I'll say, choice. And, I wonder if you have thoughts on this, to have Conor McGregor on his show. And this is someone who has had a pretty public rape case going on.
Well, yeah, he lost the civil case.
Right, exactly. And is this something that's like been talked about in like the fighting communities?
Not really. I mean, if we're being honest, like, you know what I mean? All right.
Is he such a legend?
Yes, but like he's the bloom is off the rose with him. Like he's pretty much like universally, he's not beloved as he once was.
Right. No, yeah, for sure.
The incident in Miami was pretty crazy. The incident that he was that he was sued for and lost the civil case on. I mean, like, I do tend to like, lean on, if someone's never been convicted, can we call them a rapist? But it's like, you lost a civil trial. You had to pay money for being a rapist, like according to the court. So I'm kind of comfortable with that one.
Right.
But I mean, listen, I'll tell you this, the owner of the UFC, like, publicly slapped his wife on New Year's, like at the same time he started a promotion called Power Slap. And it's like, there was no consequences. There's just no consequences.
Was she in on it? Did it seem?
No.
Oh, okay.
They were having a very heated argument.
Oh, it wasn't like some kind of okay. I was
no.
like, I was wondering if it was like a bit she agreed to that was just in poor taste. Okay.
So funny. No. This was him just open-handed, disagreeing with his wife in public. It was a whole to-do.
Interesting.
And it's like, look, at the end of the day, it's the fight business. You know what I mean? No one gets into the business of getting into their underwear and fighting another grown man in a cage because they made like solid life choices, like it's like a kill or be killed sport. And it's like, if you still have the goods, people are, still going to show up and pay to watch you fight. And it's like, I don't know, at the end of the day, the guy has like, he has his own fight company brand in Bare Knuckle FC. He has his whiskey company. He has his beer company. He has, go on down the list. It's like,
it's always good to mix alcohol with fighting.
Of course. Right. Like you just go on down the list and it's like, I don't know. This is a person who, like, they say religion is the last bastion of the scoundrel. It's like, this is a guy who went on Fallon and was talking about, the role that God plays in his life now and how material things no longer bring him pleasure. Meanwhile, he's posting videos of his own wife blowing him on a Lamborghini yacht. It's like, what are we doing, dude?
Nice.
What are we doing?
Very anti-material. I know
Listen, I'll give him this. The one thing I will give him is he did more for the like first responders and emergency aid workers in Ireland during the pandemic than the government of Ireland did.
Oh, real Spencer Pratt. You just got to do one thing good and then everyone can unsee everything else that you've ever done.
What I will say, listen, the pandemic was not kind to him. He got in trouble for punching an old man in the face at a bar. He got in trouble for taking a fan's phone and smashing it in Miami. If he had run for president off of like, we got to fix Ireland back in like 2020, 2021 range.
Yeah, he could be Ireland's Donald Trump.
Truly, he could be. And he tried to do it after the rape case came through, after the situation in Miami and a lot of these other things popped up, and people were kind of like, nah.
Did he have an official campaign in Ireland?
Yeah.
Like, was it all? Yeah.
So like president of Ireland, I think the prime minister has most of the power and president is a figurehead. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that he announced he was running for president. He had like a whole campaign thing put together and then dropped out of the race. I want to say like 3 months out from the actual election.
Right. Okay. Yeah. He withdrew ultimately because I think he probably didn't want to be embarrassed
Yeah, no, he was polling very poorly, and he came out and was like, "They don't want me to win. The deep state is against me." You know what I mean? Tried all the Trump tricks, but it's like you weren't even polling 40%. Like you were getting nothing, bro.
Right. And similar to especially Donald Trump's, I would say, second term, even more so than his first term, he ran for president, which they are describing on CNN World in Ireland as a largely ceremonial role on an anti-immigration stance. So that was kind of his thing, which we know, has been a big issue in Ireland. A lot of people have become very anti-immigrant in Ireland. So, but yeah, then he ended up not pulling out of the race because he knew he wasn't going to do well. So yeah, he appeared on Jimmy Fallon very recently, June 16th, and a lot of people online, namely Christina Ricci, who I did not appreciate some headlines referring to her as 90s star. I was like, Christina Ricci's on Wednesday on Netflix. Like, Christina Ricci is an icon. She's not a 90s star. How dismissive. She was on like the Pan Am show. Like, anyway, it just pissed me off because I love Christina Ricci. But this is
said Snar of Black Snake Moan.
Okay. Well, we all remember her from something else. She's freaking Wednesday Addams. This is Yahoo Sports. Conor McGregor's rape case explained, verdict reached, just so we know kind of the backstory a little bit and why people were really upset for Jimmy Fallon having Conor McGregor on his show and yucking it up with him. This article is from last summer, August 2nd, 2025. And this says Conor McGregor's rape case explained. The verdict reached originally appeared on Athlon Sports. Former UFC champion Conor McGregor has been involved in a years-long legal battle that has overshadowed his fighting career. Nikita Hand alleged that McGregor assaulted her in a penthouse suite at Dublin's Beacon Hotel in 2018. Hand testified that McGregor, whom she knew prior to the incident, isolated her in a bedroom, choked her, and raped her, leaving her with visible injuries documented by a sexual assault treatment unit. In November 2024, McGregor was found civilly liable for sexual assault. Now McGregor has suffered yet another significant legal defeat after Ireland's Court of Appeal dismissed his attempt to appeal a civil jury's ruling that he sexually assaulted Hand. The 3-judge panel rejected all grounds of McGregor's appeal, upholding the November 2024 verdict that ordered him to pay Hand over $285,000 in damages and approximately $1.5 million in legal costs. For Hand, the ruling closes a chapter, she says, that re-traumatized her, as is, very much often the case going through, and why so many people don't go through the legal proceedings.
Yeah, why would she's getting less than 300 grand. Her lawyers are getting 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, there's some court costs in there, but the majority of the legal fees are what the lawyers are making, right?
I think it depends what kind of, like, you can make it different deals with your lawyer. I've never had I've had many lawyers, but I haven't had these kind of lawyers. So everyone works differently. Like, a lot of lawyers work on an hourly rate. Some work on we only get paid if you get paid rate. Some work on a retainer. Those are the kind of lawyers that I work with. I work with people who, I've worked with people on a retainer, and I've also worked with people who just get 5% of my earnings. So yeah.
I'm just, the point I'm making is, like, you're going to go to trial to make some lawyer $1.5 million and walk out of it with, like, barely enough for a down payment on a house.
Sure. But I think, for many people, it's not just about the money. It's about the justice and the healing, Michael.
Sure. Right. But when I see those numbers in the light of day,
sure.
It's like, am I going through 5 years, right? Getting lambasted and getting my face plastered all over these paparazzi sites or whatever.
100%.
Right? For this, for under 300 grand, like, yeah, that doesn't seem necessarily like it makes the most sense to go after your rapist civilly.
No, absolutely not. And you're absolutely right. This is a woman who probably will be attacked for online, at least for many years to come. And certainly I would say probably can't do anything publicly because the pushback would be extreme. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And like, that doesn't seem like it's worth $285,000. She attended the appeal hearing and told the press gathered outside the courthouse, "This appeal has re-traumatized me over and over again. Being forced to relive it, what happened has had a huge impact on me." McGregor, on the other hand, receives yet another blow to his already controversial reputation amid a turbulent period. Like, even the language that's used here, I love it. Like, oh, he's a controversial figure. It's like, bitch, I'm a controversial figure. He's a rapist. Like, what is this language that we're using? He was not present for the appeal ruling and has consistently denied the claims, saying their encounter was consensual and accusing Hand of fabricating the story. Same old, same old. Once the UFC's biggest star and promotional darling, McGregor hasn't fought since a 2021 leg injury and has pivoted to political commentary. That's exactly what we needed, including anti-immigration rhetoric.
True last bastion of scoundrels.
Including anti-immigration rhetoric and a St. Patrick's Day visit to Donald Trump's White House. His aspirations for Ireland's presidency, which floated earlier this year, will now face heightened scrutiny. Despite his public persona embroiled in controversy, he has still hinted at returning to the octagon and even recently posted photos of himself getting drug tested with the caption, "I piss excellence." The fallout from this verdict could affect and define his legacy far more than any comeback bout. Now, did you watch his appearance on Fallon by any chance, Mike?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's literally like that's my thing. Well, so he talked about how he's like turned over a new leaf. He's done.
Okay.
He's done chasing the material.
Right.
He did express that, you know, he's very centered on family now. So he's been with the same girl since he was a plumber living out of his car, right? So it's like his high school sweetheart, D. Devlin. You got to kind of respect that a little bit.
I mean, it's easy to say with your high school sweetheart if you've also fucked a lot of other people during that time.
I mean, listen, I know a lot of people who have gotten the pass from their high school sweetheart who still divorced their high school sweetheart for the Bud Light model. You know what I mean? It's just
the bar is so low. Yes, go on, Mike.
You know, it is. But he married her, right? Like made an honest woman out of her.
Oh, love that saying.
So there was that. And his whole thing is like, I've refocused on family. I'm no longer interested in like this flash lifestyle. I have made mistakes. I've, the good Lord, but for the grace of God, there go I, that whole thing. Talked about how last time he was in New York, him and Jimmy Fallon got hammered together and were singing songs, and they should probably go out drinking again. But
two on the record alcoholics. That's really what bonds people.
Can't go out right now though, because he is in training camp for his return bout against Max Holloway on July the 3rd or something like that.
So very soon.
Yeah, he's coming back in July. It's the next big UFC numbered event. It's against Max Holloway, somebody who he fought when they were both up and coming prospects. Max was 19 years old at the time. Max has since become a champion in multiple weight classes and is likely going to dog walk Conor McGregor. But
that'll be fun.
Who knows? It's a very, who knows with that sport. But I do know, I used to text Christina about this, your homie. There was a guy by the name of Greg Hardy, who got run out of the NFL. He was like an all-pro. I think he made the Pro Bowl or something like that. He was accused of taking his either girlfriend or wife and suplexing her into a couch full of guns, like one of the worst domestic abuse cases we've ever heard. So bad that the NFL was like, nah, dog, too much. You're done. Basically got run out of the league within the next 2-3 years. He then switched over to MMA, came to the UFC, and every time he fought, I would text Christina and be like, hey, want to watch this guy get knocked out? And he did way more than he didn't. So there is something cathartic about watching an abuser get a taste of his own medicine in the ring. Wow.
That was your great investigative journalism. Crazy.
I'm trying to sell the sport I love, and I've learned how to speak.
There's worse sports.
When it comes to sport.
Oh, there's worse sports, honestly.
Yeah.
to have to sit through. All right. Now, speaking of sports, my favorite sport besides Knicks basketball is an expose. I love these deep dives that we do, and I think this week, the main story that I'm going to get into right now, it has so many elements that we love here on this show. Tulsi Gabbard. Not that we love everything that she does, but I think we're very interested in Tulsi Gabbard, both me and you, Mike, on this show. Cults. The how the sausage is made in politics, the concept of developing political stars. It has so much, and the Washington Post. There was a journalist there who did truly a years-long investigation on kind of where the fuck did Tulsi Gabbard come from, and this is by John Swain. It's a very long article. I went through it and I highlighted a bunch of stuff that I felt was, going to be interesting to you. There is a point when I'm going to ask you to play a YouTube video that should, it's from years ago from a TV ad, so it shouldn't get us, pinged when we upload it. But the link is below the article on the doc. It's the Hawaii ad, Mike, just so you can, be prepared for that when I ask for it. But
copy.
This is a very, very, very interesting story that I spent a long time looking into. I read this entire piece and researched different elements of it. This is a Washington Post exclusive. But yeah, so it says Tulsi Gabbard, her guru, and the mysterious messages that helped shape her political career. I obtained hundreds of confidential memos detailing politics and policy guidance for Gabbard from her years in Congress, then embarked on a quest to identify who was behind them. And, it's sometimes where people come from, politically is very traceable, and sometimes it's not. But this really made me think of a lot of things going on in New York City right now, because I do think it's important to know where the fuck someone came from. Like, I think it's important in the entertainment business, but I think it's obviously more important in politics, because these are people who are actually going to be affecting, political and legislative change. So John Swain, the journalist, the author of this article, he gets in contact with this woman named Rebecca Salzberg, who has worked with Tulsi Gabbard, and we find out later has also been very involved with Chris Butler, who is from this Science of Identity Foundation, which it's like rooted in Hinduism. So there's they're trying to claim that it's like anti-Hindu to call it a cult, but it has all the elements of a cult for anyone who's even vaguely familiar with cults. And when John Swain initially reaches out to Rebecca Salzberg, she's kind of like, no, Tulsi Gabbard, she's like, I've known her for a long time. All her views are her own as far as I'm concerned, yada, yada, yada. And then her tune quickly changes. So for a little bit of background on Tulsi Gabbard grew up in Chris Butler's breakaway Hare Krishna group. Her parents held senior positions in the organization. Rebecca Salzberg, who we'll be talking about a lot, because she's kind of the middle person in this article who's conveying information about Gabbard and this, quote unquote cult back to the author of the article and the, investigator John Swain. Salzberg said that she herself had also been a member of this, cult-like group since moving to Hawaii with a college friend in the 1990s. Chris Butler's followers practice a form of Hinduism that involves devotion to a single deity, in their case, Krishna, and certain expectations around meditation, yoga, and diet. So already we're like, okay, this is one of those weird religions that's very centered on meditation, yoga, and diet. And I don't want to say, weird just because it's not like as Eurocentric as we're used to, but it's kind of like, put a pin in it, right? Put a pin in it. Some former members, however, have called the group a cult and said disciples were isolated from the outside world. Number one sign that you're in a cult. Characterizations the group has denied. Former devotees had been telling me for weeks that Butler controlled his followers' major life decisions. Cult sign you're in a cult number 2, and demanded total obedience and secrecy. Signs you're in a cult 3 and 4. They said he spent years working to extend his reach into politics and they suspected Gabbard's rise in Washington was the culmination of that effort. I would say the only thing, because we do get to sexual assault quite quickly in the article, don't you worry. I would say like the only check mark list thing that I didn't see much of in this article as far as cults are concerned is like, fiscal abuse, that kind of thing. Usually there is some kind of, making your followers go poor fiscal abuse. But Chris Butler specifically seemed like someone who was much more interested in getting his ideas passed and made into, law than someone who was interested in specifically financial gain. Maybe there is more record of fiscal abuse if we were to dig deeper or for longer, but that's the only thing that I kind of didn't see present in this. And so, yes, the Butler's organization is called the Science of Identity Foundation, sometimes shortened to be the SIF. When you look up the SIF, they have an official website up that looks very much like yoga, meditation, kind of like barely religion, barely cult. But on Wikipedia, it's explained as a new religious movement started in the 1970s, founded by Chris Butler after he broke from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It is based in U.S. in the state of Hawaii. SIF's theology professes to combine yoga with aspects of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. The followers must observe behavioral guidelines such as vegetarianism and refraining from alcohol. But Butler's teaching, and here's where it gets juicy, also include Islamophobia and condemnation of homosexuality. Since 2019, the secretive group has come under a great deal of media focus due to the politician Tulsi Gabbard's ties to the group. And it's interesting because, like, for as much as I read the news, like, I haven't seen really anything about this until this expose today. Is this something that you have read about, Mike? We lost him.
No, specifically the cult thing. No, no, I did hear. I'm not gonna lie. Actually, I do remember hearing like something about like she was brought up in a cult, but more her ties to Russia necessarily than some cult out of Hawaii.
Right. This is completely separate from that, right? But there is a lot of kind of damning evidence, I would say, in this. So back to Salzberg, who, is the informant here. Salzberg told me she had worked for Chris Butler, as a secretary in the 1990s and lived for a time with Gabbard's parents and other devotees in rented property. And Tulsi Gabbard's parents are not just, members of this, in quotes, cult, but they also were people who had tried to run for political office, held some kind of like political positions, but did not, obviously have nearly the level of success that Tulsi Gabbard has had. Tulsi Gabbard, interestingly, also has fluctuated. When she started, she was very much a Democrat. Then she's, Trump's go-to gal. So it's kind of like for someone, and, that's not, crazy. There's definitely people who go back and forth from political parties. But it seems like she is someone who can be kind of easily influenced by a specific individual.
Can I just push back a little bit on that? Like, as far as, she was a quote unquote true blue Democrat.
She endorsed Bernie Sanders.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's not quote unquote true blue. You know what I mean? That's not Democrat establishment.
Did I say true blue?
No. You said she was very much a Democrat. I'm saying she was very much an outsider, even within the Democratic Party.
Well, no, she's a weirdo. But I'm just saying, for someone who is, went MAGA, she was super left. That was my point.
I got to push back there. I don't think she quote unquote went MAGA. I think it was a situation where one party was welcoming of people who had differing opinions, and the other party was not.
That's the background.
RFK got under the tent. That's
literally why so many people go MAGA. We see this in entertainment business all the time. And that's why I'm, that's a part of the reason that I'm doing all the work that I'm doing with Disrupt, because as the saying goes that I shared on here when I first had the phone call with the head of Disrupt, Carlos, the left is looking for traitors, the right is looking for converts. And so it doesn't really matter why you end up in MAGAville, but I'm like, if it's even worse that you don't believe in most of the things MAGA is doing and you're just there because there's someone who will listen to you and platform you. That's crazy. crazy. And that's
Yeah,
it's a big problem on the left. It's
I
like
would
one of the main problems, actually.
Yeah, if
And
the other side is
that's why I'm so hard against people who are who are just like have absolutely no nuance, who believe that people on the left have to share exactly all their worldviews, otherwise they're dismissed. It's fucking crazy, and it's a losing strategy.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Salzburg, just because there's just a lot to get through with this.
I got you.
It's quite detailed. Okay. So, yes, she lived with a time. We're back to Rebecca Salzburg. She lived for a time with Gabbard's parents and other devotees in a rented property. That to me, kind of like we're glossing over it, but to live with other followers of some certain religion or some other group that you're not related to in a rental property, again, very much giving cult. At this time in life, from we all as a society, I think, are familiar enough with cults to really see a lot of red flags, and just so many things in this article are really pointing to the fact that SIF is very much has many of the elements of a cult.
Again, little pushback. If you're like, I worked with Eric and Frank at Gas. We all got a place together. We're not related to each other. It was a rented place. Like, it's normal to have roommates from the people who you are.
It's not normal
like,
to live with someone else's. It's not normal to live with someone else's fucking family. That's crazy. And also, I can get it.
Fair enough.
But also, like, the theory on here is that it's not very hard to become a cult, and I could do a whole episode on how Gas is a cult if you wanted me to. So you don't want me to get into that. Stand-up comedy in a ways is I've called Soul Cycle a cult. Like, there's many cults. This is a cult where it's getting super dangerous because it's not on a small level. It's getting into the actual American Congress, and legislation is getting passed because of one religious leader's viewpoints. Like, that's the issue, or at least proposed. She said she had recently fallen out with the leaders of SIF, which is, of course, we love it. Like, that's why she changes her tune, Rebecca Salzburg, from the beginning of the article. Like, when the journalist first reaches out, she's kind of like, oh no, Tulsi Gabbard, like, she's like her own person. I have nothing to say about the Science of Identity Foundation. All of a sudden, she gets back in contact with him as soon as she's had a falling out with the leaders of SIF, who, wait for it, she believed were mishandling allegations of physical and sexual abuse by some members of the organization. So right there, another one of the key factors that point to, hi, I'm in a cult. A few months earlier, she said she had been arrested. Rebecca had been arrested briefly for housing a teenage runaway who alleged abuse by a parent associated with the group. Salzburg claimed SIF members had engineered her arrest. So right now, giving very much like Scientology, or so many major religions, so many cults where some of the heads inside the organization are sexual predators, and the organization tries to cover it up. Because as long as it's happening in the organization, as long as it's some kind of a tactic of control, we don't care. We don't want outside authorities involved in what we're doing privately. Salzburg told me, the journalist says, kind of when she reached back out, I was busy on another story. I wasn't really as invested in this story anymore because it took her so long to kind of come clean to me. But he had one question the last September. And that question is, do you know what 9 aisles is? Aisles, ISLES. And her answer to this question sent him on a nearly year-long quest to better understand Tulsi Gabbard. So Salzburg tells the journalist that 9aisles.com was an email domain used by Chris Butler's office, one that was reserved for secretaries and quote-unquote select disciples. She said she herself had received emails from 9 Aisles addresses where she worked on Gabbard's campaigns. And now you're kind of like, this weird email domain, emails, correspondence, we're not sure where things are coming to. It's giving Epstein files a little bit. Let's dig in. So Salzburg then, as per the request of the journalist, looks a little bit more into this 9aisles.com. She logs into an old Gmail account because she can't really remember. And she finds so much stuff to answer the journalist question. She finds dozens of attached memos that appear to document directives and advice from Tulsi, for Tulsi Gabbard from her time in Congress. Some contained instructions on what legislation she should propose, which policies she should embrace, and how she should conduct herself on television, which, none of these things are abnormal if they were like from political advisors. But even when you have political advisors, they should basically be, polishing your specific platform, or, perhaps I could even say like the platform of a party. Like, obviously, Zohran Mamdani's political advisors are kind of polishing the policies of the DSA at large, and all the other people, with the exception of Brad Lander, who is not a DSA member, just left leaning. All the other DSA candidates, you're going to be seeing very specific and similar talking points, languages, policy points from all of them. And that's coming from the heads of the DSA, right? They had, back to the article, they had an air of authority, a memo about a proposal to partition war-torn Iraq into 3 states, quoted an unnamed person as saying it was time for TG, who is Tulsi Gabbard, to come up with this idea. So he's basically pitching ideas. And when I say pitching, I don't really mean pitching, because he's pretty forceful about this in the emails. And, it's kind of like very much this investigation is making it seem that Tulsi Gabbard was merely the vessel by which Chris Butler's ideas were coming through, which my theory is this: not that everyone is merely a vessel in politics, but I think a lot of people are vessels that are more camera friendly and more charismatic than the person whose ideas they're actually representing is. This got me going into a deep dive about who is actually in charge of the DSA. I looked them up. They are neither camera friendly nor charismatic. And that was no surprise to me, because if they were, we'd see their faces, not Zohran Mamdani's faces. They're people with very low social media followings whose names we don't really see that often. And specifically, that's like for the whole nationwide DSA, that the co-chairs of it. And then specifically for the New York City chapter of the DSA, which is one of the most powerful chapters, I couldn't even find Instagrams for the 2 co-chairs of it. I could find their names. I couldn't even find their Instagrams. I found the Instagrams for the people who are nationwide. And again, we're talking like less than 3,000 followers a piece. And not to be rude, but just not the star power we're looking for. Very interesting. Because again, when you read an article, this is not like, my point in reading this is not just to be like, Tulsi Gabbard's a cult member. I think not that so many people are specifically tied to like some religious cult leader, but I think so many more politicians that we see, especially the good-looking, charismatic ones, are perhaps vessels more than they are people who are coming up with this policy themselves. All right. Some of the language was harshly critical. One memo I found from January 2015 contained a derisive assessment of a statement Gabbard was to give in response to President Barack Obama's annual address to Congress. Quote, "In the first place, nobody gives a shit what you think about his State of the Union speech, unless you're going to say something of interest," the memo quoted someone as saying. "You're not even trying. You've become really intellectually lazy." So again, language that a lot of times cult leaders use, which is basically, verbal abuse. In another, Gabbard was described as chicken shit and mealy-mouthed for her comments on a policy proposal. And the person who appeared to be issuing all of these directives and sometimes castigating Gabbard wasn't named. And, the theory in this investigation is that, if these ever were to become public, it would protect this person. But, and there's no attribution or mention of who these people are in the documents, but all signs point to it is Chris Butler, right? And, Rebecca Salzberg backs this up by saying, yeah, these memos were specifically unattributed precisely to mask Butler's identity if they ever became public. Eventually, the files that Rebecca Salzberg shares with John Swain are reach more than 25,000 pages, including hundreds of memos reflecting guidance for Gabbard between the years 2011 and 2017, mostly from her first 2 terms in Congress. In the months to come, the documents would reveal that some of the same SIF members who received the memos were involved in a separate effort that used fake social media accounts to boost and defend Gabbard online, which is not surprising. If you remember, weeks ago, maybe a month or 2 ago, we read this very long article about how it is, and this was mostly an article about how a lot of like music stars, and I think, namely Justin Bieber, but many music stars were using kind of fake bots to boost the algorithm when they released a new album or a new song. So it's really, unsurprising that political figures would be using that again. But it's yet another reason, as it pertains to this show, why we have to be so careful of taking the temperature and read on politics from only what we see online, only what we see on social media, only the comment section, only the algorithm. I think it can be one element in our research, but I think that, part of the issue, besides the misinformation and the algorithm controlling your worldview a little bit more than I think any of us know, is that the comments. I think I certainly look at the comments a lot and use it as a little like polling of the people. But you have to remember that unless you're going profile by profile and really good at determining, because some of these like bots and paid accounts are extremely intelligent, and many are not fully bots. Like many of them are accounts that are being controlled by real people who either work for some kind of an agency, as is the case with like Justin Bieber type people, or in this case, someone who's working for Tulsi Gabbard's team. So they are controlling the narrative in so many different ways. Gabbard's team, when they hear of this article, being put together, because often when you're doing an expose, it is customary for the journalist to reach out to the person who the expose is being prepared about in advance, and their team, Gabbard's team, without addressing specifics, would attack my reporting as amplifying hostility against her Hindu faith. And then they also claim that Rebecca Salzberg history with the SIF is messier than it first appeared. But before all of that occurred, I compared the content of the memos, the internal memos that Rebecca Salzberg provided, against Gabbard's record in the House, and I found unmistakable parallels. The main speaker, in a 2014 memo, pressed for her to propose legislation penalizing countries with citizens who had fought for the Islamic State and to issue a statement about it. Quote, "Get it started in the morning," the person said. Quote, "You need to be the leader in this regard. Don't dick around." I found that Gabbard released a statement the following day, and a week after that, she introduced a bill in the House. An October 12th, 2015 memo labeled CNN Wolf Blitzer Talking Points Final contained this language about reports that had been asked by Democratic leadership not to attend a presidential debate. Quote, "It's not a boo-hoo, I don't get to go to the party situation, Wolf. I dug up the clip of her appearance." Like, that's the sentence they want her to say. "It's not a boo-hoo, I don't get to go to the party situation, Wolf." That's in the memos, word for word. I dug up the clip of her appearance that day and found that she had used the line almost verbatim. Quote, what she says on Wolf Blitzer, "The issue here is not about me saying boo-hoo, I'm going to miss the party." All right. And the clip is available online if you want to watch it just as a fact check. So then we go on. The article continues to say, Gabbard's career trajectory has taken her from socially conservative Democrat to progressive darling, Bernie Sanders ally and presidential hopeful, and then to Fox News contributor, MAGA Republican, and eventually Trump's top intelligence official, a role that granted her access to some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. So, this is, that's why number one, it's important who gets that role. And then number two, it's like, we think like, are some of the nation's most sensitive secrets getting back to this guy who, who started a cult and now seems to want to expand his reach even further through his, Tulsi Gabbard vessel. And this is, interesting, of course, because, Tulsi Gabbard does have the signs of a great vessel. She's, she's interesting. She's good on camera. She's pretty good looking for a politician. All these things are sticking out. Chris Butler's interest in politics long predates the founding of the Science of Identity Foundation. Chris Butler is the son of a radical left-wing physician, and he began teaching Krishnaism and meditation after dropping out of the University of Hawaii in the late 1960s. He's tall, he's lean, he's charismatic. He attracted, and because of all of this, he attracted devoted followers who believed that he was in direct communication with Krishna. So again, much easier to start a cult when you're good looking and charismatic, and that you are able to convince people that whoever they believe in, you're in direct contact with them. You're kind of you're the middleman, just like, people think like the Pope is in direct contact with God or Jesus Christ or whatever. They think this is kind of the same here, but only this is with the Hindu religion. In 1972, devotees told a reporter for the Honolulu Advertiser that they would do anything for Butler, with anything that he asked, including kill themselves. Again, classic cult. We love it. I found Butler had said in a 1975 pamphlet that, quote, inept politicians should be removed from their seats. He suggested they be replaced by what he called saintly persons. So again, some kind of like this, like a religious, pure, like this pure religion, pure person sentiment that, we often nowadays see in the form of Christian purity, but can be applicable to really any religion. The following year, a new political party, Independence for Godly Government, sprung up in Hawaii with 14 candidates for federal, state, and local offices, records show. IGG claimed to be non-sectarian. So again, when all of a sudden a new political party, or a political party that in the past hasn't had much say or power, pops up and all of their candidates start being flung around, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying the party has bad intentions, but I also think that we shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, cool. Like, we should look into it a little bit. None of the IGG candidates won their elections. Afterward, an investigation by the Advertiser concluded that several were Butler followers and all were Krishna devotees. In 1977, Chris Butler formally incorporated his own organization and eventually settled on the name that we know now, the Science of Identity Foundation. His teachings belong to no political tribe. He inveighed against Muslims, homosexuality, gun control, and public schools, but also promoted another tenet. And I know you love homeschooling, Mike, but specifically another tenet of like cult is get the people out of public schools, get them into homeschooling. It's just really like making sure that whatever the cult is, they have control over the mind, and then that there are no outside organizations or individuals or anything with power that could possibly have control over these people's minds. Like, that's what it's all about. But
well,
also,
to be fair, the institution of school was literally a propaganda tool from its inception in like the 1800s.
What's
You know
the-
what I mean?
Oh, but where's the backstory? And I don't disbelieve you. I just am not familiar with this backstory of that. Like, I know obviously like things like the police force as we know it today was basically a response to control slaves after they were freed. But what is the origin of schooling that is control?
So
Like,
it's
what's
the
where's
pronunciation in German is Schul. And it was Horace Mann went over there and he saw that like the kids were being taken from a young age to another building, right? And just being told in their daily lessons how much they should love the nation, how much they should be,
so like
what I mean?
patriotism, nationalism kind of thing.
100% getting the kids out of the home and getting them to listen to another authority.
Right. So when you kind of Google it, quickly, it's like the original purpose of public schools in the United States was to prepare a literate population for democratic citizenship and forge a common national identity. Championed by reformers like Horace Mann, it's also served as an attempt to maintain social order, suppress dissent, and build moral character. I mean, anyone with two brain cells can tell that school is very much to suppress dissent. I mean, that's something that I figured out when I was like, I don't know, 6. That's pretty that is pretty apparent. And why I was constantly getting sent to the principal's office for my own investigative journalism and exposés in the school newspaper. All right. And, but besides, his inveighing against Muslims, homosexuality, gun control in public schools, Chris Butler promoted things like environmentalism and anti-capitalism. Look at that. No one's all bad. Among Butler's disciples were Mike and Carol Gabbard, Tulsi's parents, who moved to Hawaii in the early 1980s with their children, including young Tulsi. Mike Gabbard, for a time, also oversaw Chris Butler's personal affairs until he was fired for lapses that included failing to ensure a supply of fresh mangoes for Butler's breakfasts, according to an internal SIF memo. I mean, that's very culty. But also, reminds me of when I had to get sun chips for Conan O'Brien. So, what is a cult and what isn't a cult? In the early 1990s, the Gabbards stepped into the political spotlight. With SIF's backing, the family launched a forceful campaign against same-sex marriage in Hawaii. It included a TV ad that featured Tulsi, then a teenager, and that warned legalization would lead to people marrying their dogs. And now when I saw that, I was very upset that they didn't have a hyperlink to this ad. And I said, I wonder if I could find it on my own. And I did. And Mike, if you could please share that with us now, I think it's worth taking a beat to watch this ad that young Tulsi and her family are in.
Each of us has the right to marry. We don't have the absolute right to marry anyone we want. For example, I'm not allowed to marry my daughter or my son.
I can't marry my sister or my brother.
And I can't marry Kilo. And I can't marry my dog. This doesn't mean we don't have civil rights. Don't open the door to weird marriages. Don't let homosexuals force their values on the people of Hawaii. Vote yes on the marriage amendment.
So that was a political ad for a specific amendment that that they were trying to pass or get through in Hawaii, and they were saying like yes, they want it to be traditional marriage only. My favorite line is like when they call homosexual marriages weird marriages, and like this isn't that long ago. This is the 90s. So I know it's June, I know it's Pride, and if we're feeling kind of sad about all the things that are happening in the American government, I think it's good that we've really put to bed the storyline that if we allow same-sex marriage, all of a sudden we'll be allowing marriage to your dog. It's nice that we got off that talking point for the most part. Carol Gabbard, Tulsi's mom, who has described herself as Hindu, was elected to the Hawaii State Education Board in a nonpartisan contest in the year 2000. She acknowledged on an ethics forum that she served as SIF's secretary, but neither she nor her husband has said much publicly about their association with the group. Mike Gabbard, Tulsi's dad, who has said he is Catholic, ran for a seat in the state Senate as a Republican 6 years later, and then defected to the Democratic Party once in office. Tulsi Gabbard, meanwhile, was elected to the state legislature in 2002. She then deployed to Iraq with the Army National Guard, and after a short stint on the Honolulu City Council, was elected to the House in 2012. She took the oath of office on the Bhagavad Gita and has said she was proud to be the first Hindu American member of Congress. Then we cut to the Thanksgiving holiday of 2024. That's where we are in this investigation, where this Washington Post colleague, Kate Brown, and the writer John Swain actually go and travel to Kailua, which is a beach town on the eastern shore of Oahu. Among our first stops was a 3-bedroom house that a former SIF member had identified as one of several where Butler lived. Before long, a Honolulu police car pulled up and an officer asked us to leave. Someone in the house had complained, I later learned. I also drove to the home of Kainoa Penarosa, a former Gabbard chief of staff, and a former SIF member, and according to former SIF members, a former devotee of Chris Butler. He is also the son of the 1976 IGG candidate Bill Penarosa. So again, a lot of incestuousness happening, even if it's only, at this point in the Hawaii government. A family member answered the door and said Penarosa wasn't home. Later that day, Penarosa posted images of me from his doorbell camera to Twitter. Penarosa wrote that I had flown to Hawaii to harass and stalk former Gabbard staffers. And then, of course, Gabbard's account reposted Penarosa's tweet to her more than 3 million followers, and it was even shared from the Trump War Room account as well. So we're moving on with the investigation. There's kind of a lot of stuff in this part of the article that I didn't find to be, too damning. We then come across a memo that John Swain finds, and he says, one memo I noticed in particular, and he's still kind of trying to verify that, in fact, the author of these memos specifically is Chris Butler. And so he says, one memo I noticed in particular was from 2014 and was labeled Call with Tulsi. The unnamed speaker in that document argued that to avoid delays in medical treatment, veterans should be able to get care at any hospital and be reimbursed by Veterans Affairs, and they should be able to do so without first obtaining government approval. Actually put forward legislation, get it done, the speaker said. So again, proposing specific legislation and very specific ways that legislation has to be worded. 3 weeks later, Gabbard endorsed a version of that policy in an op-ed in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, but she omitted any discussion of prior approval, a key idea that distinguished the unnamed advisor's plan from remedies pushed by other Democrats. And Chris Butler, supposedly very pissed about that. He was specifically pissed that she didn't say in this op-ed that veterans should get private care without pre-approval. Like, that was one of the main parts of this legislation. And, Rebecca Salzberg says, I understood the person who was pissed to be Butler. A month later, Tulsi Gabbard introduced a bill that made explicit that veterans would not need pre-approval for private care. Another subject that a lot of the memos seem to be obsessed with is Syria. It says Syria was the subject of many of the memos, including one from August 2016 that documented tactical advice on one of Gabbard's signature policies, preventing the United States from ousting then Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. The memo quoted an unnamed advisor saying she should reiterate her opposition to U.S. intervention in Syria's civil war, even as a shocking image of a wounded 5-year-old made headlines. The CIA
100% right on that one.
well, Mike's moments away from joining the Science of Identity Foundation.
The literal Taliban is running the country of Syria right now. We probably shouldn't have gotten involved.
The problem isn't the policies. The problem is where the policies are coming from more so. That's what this article is about.
Coming from a dude. She was just a chick. I mean,
stop.
Whatever, man. If the idea is right, I don't care.
No. We should know the point is we should know the source of the idea. That's very important.
Okay, then
and the bias.
Should know the source of where Trump's ideas are coming from
to
overthrow a democratically elected person that we installed, by the way.
What?
You know what I mean? Like, we installed Bashar al-Assad well before he was killing 5-year-olds or whatever, right? Like whatever they want to put on him that happened during a civil war in his country, that's fine. My point is like,
we have been talking.
That's where Tulsi was getting her ideas from. Like, where is everybody else getting their ideas from?
For sure. And that's kind of my point of this article, right? And it's applicable. Again, this is not this piece or this investigation. You know, the Washington Post might be doing it as an expose on Tulsi Gabbard. I'm sharing it, as I stated before, because I think this, if you are able to apply it to many other politicians, is like, we need to know where these ideas are coming from. We need to know who's the heads of the DSA. We do need to know whose ideas, Donald Trump's ideas, are coming from. That's why when he's, his administration is like half of his friends and like people who were just correspondents on Fox News, that's alarming. And we actually have been talking about that. So all of this is very important. The CIA, back to the article, the CIA is the one that started this thing, the person said. Gabbard made that claim publicly 3 years later. As I examined the document 8 months after Gabbard's confirmation as Director of National Intelligence, I found it striking that such deep suspicion of U.S. intelligence appeared to have been fed to someone who would later coordinate the CIA, the National Security Agency, and more than a dozen similar agencies. Butler had expressed similar skepticism of the national security establishment. I had been reading SIF transcripts of his lectures, an archive of nearly 7,000 pages that a former member had shared with me. Butler claimed the CIA and other spy agencies had bugged his family home to monitor his father when he was a child. In one lecture, this part's very interesting, he warned the agencies were filled with demonic, and you knew we were going to get to demons at some point. It's not a good cult if you're not getting to demons at some point. We're filled with demonic, quote, power-hungry madmen and wanted to use psychic powers to control people. And that sentence, I also feel like, helps us understand Tulsi Gabbard a little bit more, because you just know by that little patch of gray, gray-white in her hair, that the woman loves a psychic. There's also this directive that we then see to Tulsi that says, important to do, must tweet around 9 a.m., said the subject line. It contained a pre-written tweet with a link to a video on the plight of Kurdish fighters in the city of Kobane, which was under siege by the Islamic State. And then we see September 30th, 2014, the tweet exactly as, it's addressed to Barack Obama. It says, please show aloha to Kobani Kurds, need airstrikes, heavy weapons, mahalo, must see video, and the link to the video. Every word of the tweet language is approved. She added later that Gabbard should tag senior Obama administration officials in identical follow-up posts. He'd like to see the video. She wrote, once again, he was not identified. And this is coming from another person who kind of works for Chris Butler's team by the last name Hoen, Hoen. The John Swain, the journalist, then goes on to say, I checked Gabbard's page on Twitter, now known as X. I saw that she had posted the tweet verbatim that day and followed up with posts tagging the senior officials. Then she emailed Hoen and said, sent tweet. June 2014 memo, Hoen emailed Gabbard ahead of a TV appearance was direct. Don't forget to smile. Don't do the eye thing, which made me laugh because I don't exactly know what the eye thing is. But in my family, I also am known to have an eye thing, which is like one of my eyes kind of closes a little bit in pictures and like on camera sometimes. So that's my eye thing. But apparently when women have eye things, it's very bothersome to people. On YouTube, I found a clip of Gabbard on CNN the following day. At several points, she opened her eyes wide while speaking, which is, basically to, I guess, undo the eye thing, to overcorrect the other ways around. Like if you close your eyes or squint or twitch or something, if you hold your eyes way open. A January 2015 memo documented an unnamed advisor's proposal to attack John F. Kerry, then Secretary of State, for saying violent activity by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda was rooted not in Islam, but in alienation, poverty, thrill-seeking, and other factors. If that were true, the advisor said sarcastically, the way to deal with terrorists would be to give them a trophy, a big hug, increase their self-esteem, give them a good-paying job. In a Fox News interview later that day, Gabbard repeated the Kerry quote and gave a similar mocking punchline. If that's really the cause, then the solution would be give them a trophy, give them a hug, give them a good paying job, she said. Then the journalist goes on to compare Gabbard's remarks in 32 separate TV interviews between 2014 and 2016 with talking points memos intended for them. On 24 occasions, he finds that Gabbard used language in the memos almost verbatim. And in the 8 other instances, Gabbard used different words, but promoted some of the same ideas that were being told to her in these memos. Then we kind of get into, maybe talking about Tulsi Gabbard possibly running for president. This is in 2016, I believe. Gabbard ultimately did not run for president that year and instead endorsed Bernie Sanders. As the general election race got underway, transcripts show an unnamed advisor spoke admiringly about Trump's campaign messaging. In one, the unnamed speaker said that Donald Trump had staked out the kind of maverick position that Gabbard might have taken. This is right up your alley, the speaker said about some of Trump's remarks on Islamic extremists in America. Too bad you're not running. It's all falling into place, but for the wrong guy. Now Trump is going to be the one, and he's a total idiot. So they're kind of saying, like, you missed this opportunity. Like you could have been this kind of, politician gone rogue if you had stepped up to the plate. Memos sent before Trump entered politics suggested an affinity for some of the ideas he would later adopt. In 2 of them, an unnamed advisor said the government needed to think America first, which famously became a slogan of Trump's movement. Another recommended occupying inner cities with the National Guard. In July of 2016, Gabbard delivered the nominating speech for Bernie Sanders at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. It was a breakout moment for her, placing her in the national spotlight as a rising star, however briefly, in the Democratic Party's progressive wing. Later that summer, Gabbard said that she would vote for Hillary Clinton, by then the Democratic nominee. That evening, a memo shows an unnamed speaker advised against sharing a Facebook post that was critical of Trump, an unusual move for a Democratic member of Congress. Just stay out of the presidential race, the speaker in the memo said. After Trump won in November 2016, Gabbard shocked Democrats by meeting him at Trump Tower. Hundreds of other documents in Rebecca Salzberg's trove told the story of the effort to inflate the appearance of public support for Tulsi Gabbard on social media and in the comment sections of news websites. Central to the commenting effort were dozens of social media accounts that were anonymized and other accounts that one document referred to as pseudonym profiles, which displayed fake names. Some of those featured bogus biographies, including false education and job histories, or avatar photographs copied from elsewhere online, according to a report circulated among Chris Butler devotees at the time. We then move forward. There's a lot of other stuff. I mean, this is like extremely comprehensive if you want to look into yourself. Like if you have the AI rated to you, it's literally an hour long. Then we get to March. So John Swain, the journalist, says, in March, I wrote detailed letters, in preparation for the release of this expose in the Washington Post. He says, in March, I wrote detailed letters to Chris Butler, Tulsi Gabbard, and Khomeini, who we haven't talked about Khomeini a lot, but he is described, he's kind of Chris Butler's like right-hand man in this. You know, every cult leader has a right-hand man or woman. Outline, you know, kind of the manager, you know, the day-to-day manager, outlining the memos I had seen and what I had been told about them. Understanding that Chris Butler doesn't use a computer and has no email address, very cult leader of him, I sent the letter meant for him to the SIF president, Jeannie Bishop. Neither Gabbard nor her spokeswoman answered my questions. Instead, the spokeswoman urged me to drop the entire story. She said, quote, I cannot imagine Washington Post's readers would be interested in yet another uncredible, bigoted attack on the DNI's faith, she wrote. And they also then go on, of course, as is, common, to share a statement from the SIF that Rebecca Salzberg, the informant here, was a malicious liar. And John Swain says, from the moment Salzberg told me that she had been arrested in the teenage runaway case that we talked about way earlier, and that she had this falling out with the SIF leaders, I anticipated that SIF might attack her credibility. It did, but not in the way I expected. The PR man for the SIF said that after her arrest, Rebecca Salzberg had demanded $250,000 from SIF and threatened that she would cause the organization reputational damage if she did not receive the money. It fundamentally changes the lens that we should be looking at these allegations through and evaluating them, I think, the PR man said. So then John Swain sends a message to Rebecca Salzberg saying that SIF is claiming you tried to extort them for $250K. And she goes, yeah, I know what they're referring to. And Salzberg then shares a 38-page letter that she sent Chris Butler in June of 2025, outlining the events that led to her arrest near Austin on suspicion of interference with child custody. She had copied Gabbard, Khomeini, and others on the letter, in which she referenced allegations that the runaway she sheltered and other children had been abused. She had indeed demanded $250,000 from one of Chris Butler's senior disciples, quote, to cover damages to my children and me. You know, lawyer costs and shit. She alleged that the senior disciple initially asked her to help protect the runaway, but then changed his story after the police got involved, leaving her to face a felony charge with a potential 2-year jail sentence and a hefty fine. So he asked her for a favor. He fucked her over. And then the real authorities get involved. And all of a sudden she's looking at, real world consequences. If the senior disciple didn't pay Salzberg, she wrote, she would sue him. A lawsuit could make public information that would be embarrassing for Chris Butler and Tulsi Gabbard, she wrote, while a private settlement would mitigate their reputational risks. So, a little blackmail there. A little light blackmail. She added that the money would not buy her silence. I will absolutely not tie my hands behind my back by signing an NDA or a gag order. According to Rebecca Salzberg, Chris Butler said through an aide that he would not communicate with her about the matter and that she should take it up directly with the senior disciple. She did not follow up, she said. Texas prosecutors eventually declined to pursue a criminal case against Salzberg for the allegations of child custody interference, concluding that they had insufficient evidence, records show. I mulled the significance of Salzberg's letter. It obviously showed she was in the mood to embarrass SIF the second time she contacted me, but it took me raising 9 aisles for her to dig out the Gabbard memo. So basically he's saying, like, listen, yeah, it was clear that she wanted to, Rebecca Salzberg was out for blood when it came to SIF because they had this falling out. But it's not like she came to John Swain and was like, look at all these memos. He had specifically asked her about the 9aisles.com domain. And then she was like, click, clickety, click, click, clack. I actually do have stuff on that I can present to you. It wasn't even at the front of her mind. Rebecca Salzberg told me that she decided to give me the emails not only because of her anger toward SIF leaders, but because she felt Gabbard misled voters about Chris Butler's role and his influence on her decision-making. Everyone was lied to. The people of Hawaii were lied to, she said. I feel horrible for having been a part of it. And then, this right-hand man, Khomeini, gets back involved, and he says something that highlighted how the unusual nature of the memos made his assertion hard to assess. Basically, Khomeini is trying to say, like, oh, a lot of those memos like were for me. There's no evidence that this specific body of work can be attributed to Chris Butler. He said file names, shorthand, and selective excerpts do not establish authorship. Several things, back to John Swain, several things I had noticed over the past 18 months about the documents, SIF, and the organization's unorthodox ways of communicating. It seemed at odds with Khomeini's explanation that it might have been him, right? Deep within the 173-page compilation of policy advice for Gabbard, in a section on immigration and jobs, was a reminiscence about working as a teenager in Hawaii. Chris Butler grew up in Hawaii. Neither Khomeini nor Mike Gabbard was raised there. Yeah, and a lot of these emails, both of Tulsi Gabbard's parents are also CC'd. Like, it's everyone's in on it together. So again, he's kind of Love is a Battlefield 69 says it's interesting to see the back end of these social media ops. I agree. And then, in a last ditch effort, even, because he, before reporting that, he's like really sure that all these memos can be attributed to Chris Butler. He's like, maybe I should kind of, run it through AI. And this I think is a good use of AI, that unless you are someone who is trained like with the FBI in, comparison of speech patterns, it would be hard for like a regular person to do. But basically he runs all the correspondence through Claude, and he's like, does this seem like these are different authors, the same authors? Does this seem like this could be attributed to Chris Butler? Do you think this could be Khomeini? And Claude said that the spoken remarks in the memos appeared to have been produced by just one person, and that the speaker was much more likely Chris Butler than Khomeini or Mike Gabbard. It noted that duplistic, a non-word used instead of duplicitous, appeared once in the memos and 9 times in Butler's lecture archive, which is great because it's like something like this that would take a human so long to go through. This to me is like one of the greatest uses of AI, is kind of like, I don't want to call it clerical work. It's like archival work, right? To go through archival, as someone who worked in the archival department on Michael Moore's Sicko, going through archival footage takes forever, right? And years ago when I was doing this work, I was transcribing manually all of these archival pieces that were used in that documentary. Now, it would be so much faster and, without error if we ran those videos through AI and then had AI pull it. And AI can also do things much easier that a human would not be able to do, or that would take a human a level of expertise and a long time to do, which is like find these kind of really small similarities. Like, would I have noticed like that someone used a non-word duplistic? Maybe I would have noticed, but fucking Claude is noticing, probably within 10 minutes or less, depending on how long these archives were. So I do think that's like a really good use of that when we're talking about like heavy research and then going through like a lecture archive, listening to hours and hours, things that you have to transcribe. Like, that's a good use of AI. Other non-standard words used in both the memos and the lectures, including judgmentalism, suggested that Butler was the unnamed advisor, according to Claude. John Swain goes on to say, I spoke with a family member of one of the candidates who had run for Independence for Godly Government. That's such a funny party name. In 1976. She said she feared retribution. Again, retribution, big sign that you're in a cult. We see it in the Trump administration, but we also see it, which, has cult-like qualities, but we also see it, definitely in Scientology. And honestly, we see it in the DSA too, right? Because we talked about this a lot. And I'm sure it's in the Democratic and classic Republican parties too. I'm just talking about kind of new things a lot. And the DSA, we did see it because AOC, who had been platformed heavily by the DSA in the beginning of her career, she had gone astray a little bit from policy, and in retribution, the DSA was like, yeah, we're not going to back her and we're not giving her an endorsement. This was a couple of years ago. She's since on back on track with them. But and again, it's just, I'm just dying to know like the hidden information, and I'll get to it, guys. I'm slowly but surely I'm getting deeper into the political world here in New York, and I'll get these answers for you. But these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. I just want to know where all this is coming from, who is making these decisions, who is really the brains behind the legislation that we see presented by our, good-looking, camera-friendly political vessels. I'm dying to know, but hopefully not. But don't kill me. Thank you so much, everybody. She told me that Butler had advised the IGG candidates. So she said she feared retribution from SIF and agreed to talk with me as long as I didn't publish her name. She told me that Butler had advised the IGG candidates while working to hide his connections to them, and that he avoided written communications, instead using intermediaries to deliver his campaign advice. She said Butler was obsessed with politics. He wanted, she said, to, quote, to rule the world. The time frame of documents we reviewed meant that they could not show whether Gabbard continued receiving guidance after she left Congress and eventually joined the Trump administration. But I found echoes of years-old guidance in her more recent remarks. One phrase in particular stood out. In 2014, Hohen, again, one of the hench people of Chris Butler, emailed Gabbard a statement for posting online that said Gabbard made every decision through the prism of, quote, the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. She repeated that phrase in the first paragraph of her 2024 memoir. And after she was nominated, how crazy is it to use someone else's line as the first sentence of your own memoir? And I know lots of memoirs have ghostwriters. I'm just like, maybe write the first sentence yourself, though. And after she was nominated by Trump, Gabbard made it her mantra, using it in her Senate confirmation hearing, her inaugural statement as DNI, her presentation of this year's annual threat assessment, and many other occasions. On May 20th, having received no answers from Gabbard to my questions for 2 months, I emailed her press secretary, and her chief of staff. I let them know we plan to proceed with a story about her association with Chris Butler. I again invited Gabbard to address my questions. 2 days later, Fox News reported that Gabbard, whose departure had been rumored for months, would be leaving the position of DNI this month because her husband had been diagnosed with a rare bone cancer, right? And so I know we had a lot of questions circulating about the minute she said her husband had been diagnosed with a rare bone cancer, we're going, okay, what's really going on? Some commentators observed that she still had a promising political future, maybe even more so because she was not aligned with Trump on the Iran war and other unpopular policies. On one of Gabbard's last days in office, in response to additional inquiries from me, her chief of staff sent a statement characterizing the reporting as allegations tied to a failed $250,000 extortion attempt by a disgruntled former volunteer seeking personal profit, not truth. I feel like anytime we use the word disgruntled, we know the person is 100% not lying, because that's like we like to throw around disgruntled with anyone the way we throw around like crazy with women specifically. Like, oh, they were disgruntled. Oh, you mean they were on to you and you didn't like that? The attacks on Director Gabbard's faith and loyalty are not only false, they are a blatant example of anti-Hindu bigotry, the statement said. Super leftist of them. As I had worked on this story, I had kept tabs on the social media accounts that had been a part of the campaign to defend and boost Gabbard online while she was in Congress. At least 7 of those accounts, what is this? We're still posting about Gabbard on X in early 2025 as she went through the Senate confirmation process. By following a link buried within the years-old Skype messages that Rebecca Salzberg had provided, I also found a Google Doc where the commenting group flagged social media posts about Gabbard for potential response. The document was still being updated daily as recently as April of last year. And then they just give some examples of, things that people were, tweeting. DNI Gabbard is a true patriot and will be missed, from I'm a cruisin' at IMACRUZN. Another account posted Tulsi Gabbard is a patriot. She will be greatly missed. Another account says Tulsi will be missed. She is truly one of a kind and a true patriot. And again, this is not specific to Tulsi Gabbard and her campaign. We see that a lot on both Threads and X with a lot of these influencers who are paid by either the right or the left now. The right was, to that, organize that kind of social media similar messaging first. And then the left finally was like, well, we're getting absolutely destroyed. We should probably do the same thing. And we talked about that. So that's that whole expose. I found that very interesting. I hope that you guys found it interesting as well. And again, I wouldn't have gone through it if I thought it was like, Tulsi Gabbard specific. My hope with this show is that when we go over stories, it should be, I hope, clear that, just like when you see one ant in your home, it's never one ant. The same is true for storylines within politics and government. If something happened once, most likely it is not a tactic or template that is unique to that. It is something that probably has been happening, certainly throughout our lifetimes, and maybe even back to 1800s. We talked about things last week that were like dating back to the 1800s. Nothing is really new. It's just us taking templates that have worked historically and reusing them again and again. All right, the other main story, which I didn't even see a ton of coverage of. If you Google it, it comes up, but like it wasn't coming up organically in my yes.
So just real quick before we move on, is the next story about Tulsi?
Is it about Tulsi? No.
Because that's like, I don't know, the big news about her for me this week was like all of the disclosures she made on her way out the door.
Okay, do you want to share those with us?
Well, I mean, she really pointed a pretty, pretty straight finger at Anthony Fauci.
Saying what, though? Everyone's pointing a finger on the right at Anthony Fauci. They love that. That's their favorite pastime.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go ahead and disagree.
Fauci was like the number one enemy for a while.
For a while, yeah. I mean, no one's talking about him in 2026.
Not as much anymore. So what was her accusation?
Released collection of declassified documents about COVID-19's origins and Dr. Fauci. The headline claim was explosive. Fauci funded Wuhan lab research that sparked COVID. Her press release and accompanying 5-minute long video monologue went further, accusing Fauci of manipulating intelligence assessments and lying to Congress. So
lying to Congress about what? Like how? About COVID?
Yeah.
But like, what about COVID? What were they lying about?
I'm not sure what what his line to Congress is, but the guy was talking to Congress like every day. She called out the insane amount of bioresearch studies that America funds around the world. Yeah.
And her point being that COVID can be linked back to the American government, like we did this to ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay.
that Wuhan lab, doing the gain of function research as Charles Num is talking about here. Like, yeah, I mean, there's very direct ties between Fauci and the lab in the bioresearch lab in Wuhan, where it's like, well, if you put 2 and 2 together. And we've moved on from the pangolin at the wet market theory. Most likely came from a lab that has strong ties to Dr. Fauci.
I mean, right. Okay. So like when you Google that, the first thing that comes up is like that lab leak land page on the White House website, which I don't know that we can really trust.
Right. And I mean, I'm seeing something on Lawfare here saying that like,
because we read this on the show because I was making fun of this.
Right. From the White House page.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying like there are things that are saying like, yeah, the Tulsi thing is not as explosive as it seems. But I just like, listen, for me, anytime anyone's like a lame duck and they choose to use that time to be like, all right, here's the things I found out while I was director of national intelligence. Here's some stuff I think the American people would find interesting. It's like, I don't know, man. I wish more politicians were operating that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of one of the reasons that I liked some stuff about Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she was a loose cannon, and she really didn't seem, at times she felt beholden to Trump, but then when she kind of went rogue, I think that's when she was her best self, and she was like, I'm telling on everybody. Like, that's ultimately what you need, but it's hard because, like, obviously we're not going to have political parties made up of a bunch of individuals. There has to be like these, there has to be a consensus of how members of these specific political parties, like what they think and how they are going to present themselves in the world. There was also another funny page that I think the White House put up this week that I'm just now being reminded of. That was like a list of like bad boys or something. It was crazy. It was like a list of like, basically a list of like their enemies or something that they put up on the White House website. I can't even find it now. Geez, there's so much stuff. But there's some like landing page I wanted to go to that's kind of like Donald Trump's like list of enemies or something. It includes like just like a bunch of journalists that he doesn't like, who have written articles that are not flowery about him. Oh gosh, what is this? All right, well,
I think I found it. Is it the whitehouse.gov/media bias publication / leftist influencers?
Yeah, probably. If I look at it, I'll be able to. Can you?
Yeah, it's media offenders and
whitehouse.gov/media offenders.
I'm gonna put it in the chat, and I'll pull it up for the people at home. Is this it? What you were talking about?
It's like a less, and like a lot of these people are like journalists and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
So it says the offense: while President Donald J. Trump was in the Oval Office and Situation Room commanding one of the most daring, complex military search and rescue missions in modern history, the rescue of 2 airmen from deep inside hostile Iranian territory, deranged leftists and the fake news media were spreading vicious, fabricated conspiracy theories about a non-existent health crisis at the White House. The truth, fueled by unhinged fringe accounts on social media garnering millions of views, collapsing liberal media outlets turn internet gossip into front-page quote-unquote news, dishonestly framing it as a full-blown scandal, completely ignoring President Trump's ironclad leadership and triumphant success of our troops. Key points: the left spread false rumors that Trump was in the hospital. In fact, he was hard at work for the American people. And then a list of sources.
This is so crazy. And then like the offenses go on and on. But yeah, I knew there was some kind there was some kind of like list of enemies page that had been added to the White House.
Media offender of the week, CNN. You've been exposed.
And it has an exposed stamp, kind of like the way, like with Married with Children, that they would stamp like with children on it on Fox. God,
incredible.
I miss that. Really, really incredible. You know what? Whoever's updating this website, hard at work as usual. And speaking of official government sites, so apparently last week while you were at the UFC fight on the Great Lawn, Michael, you could have been the victim of a violent attack on the White House.
Yeah, no, it's why I got life insurance before I went.
Oh, what? Because you knew that was happening? Possibly?
I knew that there was going to be some kind of an attempt, and it's like, I don't know, man. This is the same Secret Service that let Trump get fired on how many times? Like, right? You know what I mean?
Well, good for you. That's nice for looking out for your family, and So apparently it was going to be a drone attack, and then the drones were going to cause everyone on the Great Lawn to flee, and then there were going to be snipers who would then shoot at the people fleeing. But this is right from the justice.gov website. I'm going to read that first, and then we'll move on to the NPR piece. It says 5 men arrested and charged in plot to attack and kill government officials, others attending Ultimate Fighting Championship at White House. For immediate release, Columbus, Ohio. The Justice Department announced today charges against 5 men for an alleged plot to carry out an attack to kill government officials and others attending the Ultimate Fighting Championship UFC Freedom 250 event held at the White House last Sunday. The FBI launched an investigation into the plot and identified a group of conspirators who procured weapons and made plans to carry out the attack. The FBI made arrests over the weekend in Ohio, unsurprisingly, Missouri, Nebraska, and California. The investigation remains ongoing. The FBI, our law enforcement partners, and our U.S. attorneys did what they do every day to make America safe through quick response and vigilance in investigating, disrupting, and dismantling this alleged plan before it could be carried out, said Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. We will take immediate and aggressive action to identify and prosecute those who incite and plan acts of violence. On June 10th, FBI and our law enforcement partners became aware of a potential threat to the UFC America 250 event in Washington, D.C., involving individuals outside of the national capital region. And thanks to the rapid action of the FBI, our partners and the Department of Justice in a multi-state operation, multiple individuals are now in custody and allegedly planned attacks were stopped cold, said FBI Director Kash Patel. While the result represented the best of investigative work, it was also nothing out of the ordinary for this law enforcement team. We are built to detect, respond to, and bring justice to those who threaten the lives of American citizens, particularly during large gatherings like the historic UFC 250 fight. That's exactly what we did here. I want to thank our great agents and partners. This work remains ongoing, and we will continue to update the public as permitted. U.S. Attorney Dominic S. Gerace II said the investigation of this plot began on June 10th here in the Southern District of Ohio. Thanks to the urgent and diligent work of our AUSAs, our law enforcement partners, and our sister U.S. attorney offices, 5 men from around the country are now in custody for an alleged plan to carry out an attack to kill government officials and others attending the UFC Freedom 250 event held at the White House on Sunday. As alleged in our complaint, the investigation revealed that a man from Knox County, Ohio, amassed weapons, ammunition, and tactical gear in his home in Ohio, connected with like-minded individuals online, and had identified targets for an attack. We are proud to have some of the nation's finest investigators and AUSAs in this district and are immensely grateful for their work to thwart this attack. Protecting the President of the United States and the White House grounds is priority number 1 for the U.S. Secret Service, blah, blah, blah. We're, more, patting ourselves on the back. And according to the charges, it's Tyson C. Proper, 19, of Danville, Ohio, Brian Omar Roa, 24, of Calamisa, California, Michael Allen Thomas, 32, of Pinion Hills, California, Daniel K. Eskridge, 32, of Kidder, Missouri, and Abraham Hermosillo Alvarez, 31, of Omaha, Nebraska, conspired to plan and execute a mass casualty event targeting U.S. officials in attendance at the UFC fights on the White House grounds. The conspirators allegedly planned to deploy drones armed with explosives in and around the UFC Freedom 250 event in order to force an evacuation of the event, and then plan to deploy snipers to fire upon high-value targets, and that's in quotes, within the fleeing crowd. Love is a Battlefield says, all of that UFC attack stuff is the most obvious FBI setup since January 6th. Wow. LOL, it's easier to invent criminals than catch real ones, says Charles Num. Alfred's here. And then they go through a bunch of, yes.
Just my favorite part about the, quote unquote, for immediate release at the top of this.
Right.
Kash Patel announced the FBI's brave work to thwart the plan and how incredible the FBI is.
Right.
Before 2 of the suspects were apprehended.
Well, maybe they just added them on later.
No.
So
they had a list of people to go after. Kash said, well, we got them. Okay, cool. Didn't find out that of the 5 men, only 3 were arrested and 2 now knew they were being hunted by the FBI.
Wait, but was an article written about that? Or are you just assuming this based on the date of the release?
So I heard about this on Twitter and then I Googled it.
Well, then it
and
must be
was-
true.
All right.
Wait, but then where did you see that? Like, what was
The Times?
And if you say Reddit, I'm gonna flip out. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the Times posted something about it. Let's see. From the Kay Dillian show, Secret Service officials are furious that FBI Director Kash Patel talked about.
What's the
thwarting
Kay
trial.
Dillian show?
I don't know. I'm just going down the list. This is a real thing that, like,
Okay.
all right. I'll find an article that goes into more detail about Kash Patel fucking it up. You gotta throw dirt on Cash's name whenever you can. I think.
No, for sure. I mean, it's obviously that this was in his mind an opportunity to be like, look at us, the FBI, we're doing a great job. We saved lives again. We're doing exactly what we should be doing. We should get paid so much money. All right. So I'm in the NPR article now. It said officials say the group members harbored fringe conspiracy theories and hoped the attack would destabilize the government. The investigation began after the mother of an Ohio man contacted police because she was concerned about her son's recent firearms purchases and online communications. According to an FBI affidavit filed in the case, the man, 19-year-old Tyson Proper, told investigators that he was part of a group that wanted to trigger a revolution and target members of the government, and that they planned to fly explosive-laden drones into the event and then shoot panicked crowd members as they fled, according to the affidavit. And he goes through his charges. Investigators recovered high-powered firearms from several of the suspects and reviewed encrypted text messages between roughly 20 participants who shared detailed maps and aerial photographs of the area and discussed the need for a safe house and escape routes after the intended attack, the documents show. But it's unclear from the court records how close the would-be attackers could have come to being able to carry out that plan had it not been thwarted. Several suspects or co-conspirators who were questioned by the authorities said they did not intend themselves to carry out violence, but planned to instead observe others. One said he would have traveled to the UFC event as a protester, but had to return home after his vehicle malfunctioned. And though the participants spoke of using drones rigged with explosives, charging documents suggested they were still looking to acquire such equipment when the plot was interrupted. Prosecutors say Rinker distributed cash to some of the conspiracy members and that he accepted goods, including weapons, a 3D printer, a computer, and other items, and agreed to produce drone parts. Rinker told an investigator that he didn't actually intend to help build the drones, suing the printer. What? The drone suing the printer, according to an FBI affidavit, and just wanted the printer so he could make and sell crafts. An FBI affidavit says Faulkner communicated with other group members about his ability to procure and operate drones, as well as what tactics and explosives to use in the plot. After news broke that the plan had been disrupted, Faulkner texted another group member to say, "Work trip is canceled. My boss got picked up," and sent a link to an article detailing the initial arrests. Okay, this feels very sloppy and weird, and like, I mean, the minute that they said like that one of the guys was 19, I was like, it's a lot of really young people who seemingly have been behind a lot of these. I'm like, what is? It just doesn't seem like
that's
everything.
That's
really
who the
adds up
boomers
here.
fear.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm like a 19-year-old. I don't even really know 19-year-olds who can, like, hit on a girl properly. Never mind coordinate a drone and sniper attack. Okay. All right. Well, that was that. Those are our main stories for this week. I'm going to go into municipal politics a little bit, as I teased at the top of the show. As I said, I looked into, who are the heads. And if you want to bring up pictures of these people, if you can even find them, they do have, these two people do have Instagrams. But I was like, who even runs the Democratic Socialists of America, right? Because that was the talk yesterday, that the DSA, now has proven itself not to be just a one-trick pony, right? All of the people Zohran Mamdani has endorsed won their primaries yesterday. And this is, really possibly saying like, maybe the DSA can even, end up producing a strong presidential candidate in 2028. And so I looked up who are the national co-chairs. It's Ashik Siddiqui and Megan Romer. And again, I'm like looking these people up because I'm just thinking like, whose ideas are we actually like, obviously I know the DSA was not founded by these people, but if they're the co-chairs, they're the people who are in charge of like what policies in modern times we want to be, spreading and passing legislation on. And so that's who we got. If you can find pics of them, like again, their Instagrams are, if you just type in their names, it's like, those are, it's like the first people who come up. Again, they don't have a lot of followers. And then in New York City, it's Gustavo Gordillo and Grace Mouser. Those are the co-chairs. Again, maybe we could find pictures of them. I could not find social media for them though. I did not know. And I feel like Gustavo Gordillo.
That's Gustavo.
Okay, so that's Gustavo. Thank you. So again, these are people who I'm not. This is not like, oh, I'm getting this together to call them ugly, but I am just kind of saying like we know ourselves as people. If we're gonna listen to someone, they have to be attractive, but not by model standards, by politics standards. And they need to be charismatic. I mean, even just think of like, Bill Clinton and that guy, was that Gustavo again? He looked kind of okay in that video.
No, that is
Ashik Siddiqui.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, he looked way worse in another picture I saw. But it's he looks. I think he's a little short. That's why. Like Zohran Mamdani is tall.
Is he? How tall is Zohran?
Not like towering. He's pretty lanky, but he's look at that picture of him and Zohran together. Look how much Zohran's leaning down to get with Ashik.
Is he? I don't know.
He's leaning down.
All
yes,
right.
look at him. Yeah, no. I mean, and this is all just like, this is just for us to piece together that there's so much, there really is so much that's going into what makes a good political candidate. Barack Obama, people thought he was very handsome, charismatic, strong. Bill Clinton, charming, good looking. AOC, beautiful for, I think she's beautiful, period, but for stunning for a politician, absolutely stunning. I look at her a lot of times and I'm like, she could honestly have been an actress. Like that's how, good looking she is. Zohran, very camera friendly face, nice smile, taller. Like I'm sure they have his height. I think he's like at least 6 feet tall. Again, very skinny, lanky, I would say, but tall.
This saying
their listing has 5'11" and a quarter. So again, like I was gonna say, my guess off the top of my head was 6 feet. So I think that's pretty, And then another thing, it says he's listed as 5'11" or 5'10", but we're getting up there. Like you want to, when you're dealing with guys in the public sphere, you basically want to hit that 6 foot mark. And
I just found a Yahoo article from Randy.
How did you just say that? Yahoo?
Whatever.
Yeah.
A woman claiming to have matched with Zohran Mamdani on Hinge 6 years ago rejected him because he wasn't tall enough.
I definitely could see that.
All right, and then this is the other co-chair.
And so this is Megan Romer. Yeah. And again, like this is not about shading what she looks like, but it's more about like, if this is the person who showed up with the same ideas as Zohran Mamdani, she would not have as many people behind her. She's a little older. She has some gray in her hair. She's overweight. Like it's just not working. And so, as much as we make it seem like it's, it's only about the policy, it's about so much more than the policies. And that's important. It's important in who we decide to lift up because, at the end of the day, because votes still are really votes and still, it is the constituents still making decisions. With that in mind, we have to keep in mind that we are fickle. we are shallow as a people overall. We do care about if people are smiling a lot. We care about people. We listen to and get giddy over candidates who are more attractive. Like, this is just human nature. And so you can have the best ideas in the world, but those two people who are the national co-chairs of the DSA, they're not winning any big seats. I could see, they could be winning smaller seats, because in smaller municipal politics, you can really look like anything. When you get up to higher roles like mayor, I'm not saying they're all like hottie boom bodies, but they're not like traditionally like unattractive people. Like, they're just not. And this is important to keep in mind when we're talking about like the vessel. I just got really obsessed with like the vessel through which the messaging and the policies are being served to us. And so then there was this interesting article also in the Washington Post. Again, I feel like every week, like, some news outlet has kind of like really good stories. And I feel like the Washington Post really was doing it for me this week. I feel like in the past, I loved the Washington Post, and I haven't felt as drawn to their articles as of late, but I think they are doing better now. Wait, why is this Washington Post calling it NPR? Okay, 1 second. So yeah, this was also sent to me by Wacko George, and it says it's from today, this morning, day after primaries in New York City. Mamdani emerges as kingmaker. Kingmaker. This is the language we're using. So again, when we talk about, when I say endorsements make you more powerful as a politician, they're literally using the word kingmaker. I don't know what more it will take to convince you. Mamdani emerges.
That's a standard.
It's exactly. But when we talk about like people who are acting like endorsements are not what they are, driving me fucking nuts. It's driving me fucking nuts. And so I'm going to keep doubling down on it. Mamdani emerges as kingmaker, and other takeaways from Tuesday's primaries. And part of this is like, yes, obviously, like if you believe in the policies of the DSA, and overall, I think they have a lot of great policies. And if you want that to be so, not just for New York City, but for the entire nation, yes, you are going to have to lift up other DSA members. But I want to know what kind of a vetting process these other members are going through, and what, if anything, Zohran Mamdani owes them for his success. That's the part I don't trust. I like how many favors are going on here, and how many people are actually like fully equipped, and how long has the DSA been working on these particular people, developing these particular candidates? Is Zohran saying, personally saying, I like these people, I want to endorse them, or is the DSA saying this is a list of I bet in a couple years we'll get a Washington Post expose of memos of someone at the head of the DSA being like, hi, Zohran, we gave you 30,000 free volunteers for your mayoral campaign in New York City, many of them flown in from other states. I know that from boots on the ground. And we also, through our email list, when no one knew who you were able to raise you over $100,000 within the first 24 hours of your mayoral campaign announcement in October 2025. Now, what you will do for us is endorse candidates A, B, and C. All right. So Mamdani emerges as kingmaker, and other takeaways from Tuesday's primaries. Democratic Socialist candidates won key races in New York, while more establishment candidates prevailed in other contests. This is by Erin Cox, Teo Armas, Matthew Choi, and Natalie Allison. Democratic Socialist candidates swept key primary races in New York Tuesday, accelerating their rise within the Democratic Party, while more traditional center-left candidates and moderates backed by corporate interests prevailed in other contests. Results of of course, you're going to endorse people in districts where you know that progressives actually have a chance of winning, one of which being my district, which is like, Brad Lander was vying for, parts of Brooklyn where like Eastville Comedy Club is, very progressive kind of space. They have like a thrift store called Out of the Closet that only gives money back to like LGBTQ organizations, like just to kind of paint a picture, next to a coffee, shop, next to a comedy club, that kind of vibe.
I was also just reading Latin, specifically his district was like one of the highest Jewish population districts in New York, who had a
whose district, Lander or
who had like a very clear track record of like pro-Zionist, pro-AIPAC candidates just easily taking it, and the pro-Zionist, pro-AIPAC candidate got absolutely smoked this time. So it's like, they were just pointing to the changing winds in New York, so to say.
Well, but also very strategic candidate then place, because this Brad Lander, I am like, I have to double check this, but I'm like 95% sure he doesn't actually live in this district, right? So it's, and it's not crazy to run for Congress in a district that you don't live in. You have to have some relationship to the district, but I'm like pretty sure, this is easily look like, but I believe I checked this when he was running, because I thought it was think that he was running because, this is a district that I looked into running in because I actually live here. And I think he lives in a nearby one. Brad Lander, which district in NYC does he live in? Which then speaks to Brad Lander lives in. Yeah. Okay. So he lives in the 39th City Council district. Wait. Oh no, he does live in 10. He does. Okay. I thought there was an article that said he doesn't live in 10. It says he does live in 10. Yeah, I think you would have to, because I know another relationship that he has. So this is District 10. So he does live here. So never mind on that. But anyway, it was still it still makes sense that they would specifically want to run him and put Zohran Mamdani's power behind him. And that's because they know that if this neighborhood, and it's weird that it's historically been pretty AIPAC, because there's a lot of artists here. I guess it's because of maybe like East Village and stuff, the level of wealth. But I'm like, I don't find this neighborhood at all to be particularly Jewish. Like there was parts of Brooklyn and then Upper East Side, Upper West Side, which are definitely specifically very Jewish neighborhoods. But I wouldn't really attribute that to the neighborhood I live in. But again, the district is much more than just my neighborhood, right? And so like my neighborhood, like just like a lot of like young like artist types who I don't really think are specifically Jewish. But it made sense to place Lander here, because if you're going to run against a place that usually is like voting for AIPAC interests, you probably going to want to run someone who is Jewish. And Brad Lander is, Jewish, very on the books Jewish, you can tell he's Jewish by talking to him, just on the books Jewish. And, he's a Jewish candidate who has been very open with saying, he'll say free Palestine on camera, which is something that Jack Schlossberg would not say. He was, saying, I'm not taking money from AIPAC, but if you listen to or go back and watch some videos he's done during these primaries, he also did continue to speak out against anti-Semitism and say some things that, basically any Jewish candidate who hasn't like completely turned their backs on the Jewish people is going to say. He has also pointed out, as I have spoken about on this show many times, how while it is 100% true that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, online, it has certainly, Zionist has certainly been mangled to be used as an anti-Semitic slur. And he talked about that, I think, in like something that, a clip that went up yesterday. So it was kind of like the perfect amount of like, standing, up for Jewish safety, while also being like, I'm anti-AIPAC and I'm comfortable with saying that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, and I'm comfortable saying free Palestine. So they really like put a lot of thought, I think, into who they were endorsing in this area. And, just because he lives here, he wasn't necessarily getting the nomination. So that makes a lot of sense then. All right, let's get back to this article. I don't know where I left off. Democratic Socialist candidates swept key primary races in New York Tuesday, accelerating their rise within the Democratic Party, while more traditional center-left candidates and moderates backed by corporate interests prevailed in other contests. Results of primaries across 4 states Tuesday cemented the growing influence of New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani's brand of progressive populism while demonstrating its potential limits outside of large East Coast cities. New York City voters nominated 3 left-wing U.S. House candidates endorsed by Mamdani, boosting his clout as a political kingmaker and ousting 2 incumbents in the process. Comparatively, moderate Democrats prevailed in other primaries, including in Maryland and Utah. Artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and pro-Israel groups also figured heavily in Tuesday's contests. Here are 5 takeaways from Tuesday's night's primaries in New York, Maryland, and Utah, and runoff in South Carolina. Mamdani, Democratic Socialists of America, among the big winners. The biggest winner of the night in New York was arguably someone not on the ballot: Zohran Mamdani. Less than 6 months into his term as mayor, Mamdani put his political capital on the line by endorsing 3 insurgent candidates over 2 sitting members of Congress and a retiring incumbent's chosen successor. And I know you guys, if you're not from New York, you might not know what all these candidates look like. But if you look back at like even the footage of Zohran being at a lot of these Knicks events over the past couple months, when you look to his right and his left at almost every event, you saw Claire Valdez, you saw Brad Lander, you saw Darializa Chevalier. They were always with him, so that he made part of his job for these past 6 months endorsing them to the point where it was like, I thought, excessive. But obviously, the tactic is working. Is it working in favor of the constituents of New York City? I don't know. All 3 of his picks won in a signal of strength for Mamdani's political brand and the Democratic Socialist movement that powered his rise to City Hall. And I mean, especially, when we're talking about an incumbent, Brad Lander absolutely annihilated Dan Goldman. And it's, so interesting because, in a city of 8.5 million in your district, to run a congressional primary, and this is like to slaughter a primary, Brad Lander got 55,000 votes. That's what he got. Like, when you think about that, it's like, so this is really like boots on the ground work. We go through. The Democratic Socialists of America formally endorsed 2 of Mamdani's choices: activist and PhD student Darializa Avila Chevalier, who beat Representative Adriana Espaillat, and State Assembly member Claire Valdez, who was nominated to succeed retiring Representative Nydia M. Velasquez. Brad Lander, Mamdani's 3rd pick, was not officially backed by the group, and he wasn't backed because Brad Lander, while he does a lot of work with the DSA, similar to me, is not a member of the DSA. Same as me, but received significant support from its members and allied organizations on his path to unseating Representative Dan Goldman. And it's interesting because there was a lot of talk on super leftist, political Instagram that my algorithm is, that was kind of looking at, I don't want to say Easter eggs, but looking at signs and kind of saying that it already seemed like the extreme left was already getting bored with Brad Lander. So we'll see if being DSA adjacent is enough for him to hold this, what we assume the congressional seat that he will win for more than 1 term, or if they turn on him. Again, I don't know. Stay tuned. The group has seen major momentum recently with a win in the D.C. mayor's race earlier this month. A congressional race in Denver next week will test DSA appeal outside an East Coast city as Malat Quiros challenges Representative Diana DeGette, who is a Democrat in Colorado. And if any of you are super familiar or working on Malat Quiros's campaign or know anything insightful about her, just locally, you're going to get more great news sources fed to you. Please send it my way, withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. If you like her, if you don't like her as a constituent in Denver, let me know. I'm very interested to hear more about that. I went to her Instagram page, watched some of her videos, seemed to like her vibe, but I'm not trying to vote on just vibe. Even yesterday, I did extensive policy research for everyone that I was voting, and definitely did not go off vibe. In New York, DSA-backed challengers had also ousted at least 3 more moderate members of the state assembly. At an election night watch party, Mamdani said the victories for Valdez and those down ballot candidates represented a sequel to his own primary win. A year ago was not the end of a political movement, he told the crowd at a watch party. It was the beginning. An establishment pick prevails in another NYC race. The Democratic Party's old guard came out on top in New York's 12th congressional district. state, and this was the other one with the Jack Schlossberg race that a lot of people were watching heavily, and we've talked about a lot on this show. State Assembly member Micah Lasher, a longtime fixture of the city's Democratic Party, defeated a star-studded cast to succeed retiring Representative Jerry Nadler, who is very well-known congressman. Nadler, a 17-term incumbent, had endorsed Lasher to represent the rich and highly educated district that includes much of Midtown Manhattan and the Upper East Side and Upper West Side. Lasher also had the support of Governor Kathy Hochul and former Mayor Mike Bloomberg. So a lot of money in that race, who invested millions of dollars in a super PAC to support Lasher. Mamdani, who lives and votes in the district, stayed neutral in the race. And why did he stay neutral in the race? Not because he didn't care, because he knew it was a race he couldn't win. So he said, I'm going to be quiet. I'm guessing had he supported, he would have gone for a candidate named Alex Borez, who was not annihilated, performed well, but did not win, right? And then Jack Schlossberg, as the cunty articles say, came through in a distant third. But we knew Jack Schlossberg wasn't going to win after he was caught so many times on like street interview type social media things, and was unwilling to, say things like what's happening in Gaza is a genocide or free Palestine. He just like wouldn't say stuff like that. And the minute you don't say that, you're not winning, especially for someone like him who is running off of his fame on social media, right? Like and that's also the problem, again, when we talk about my race, right? When people say, why didn't you run for something smaller? Jack Schlossberg, way more famous than me on social media. We're talking about, close to, if not at 1 million followers already, was, in the 700, 800,000 when he entered the race, and that's great for raising money and great for getting articles written about you. But ultimately, when you're running for Congress, it only matters what the people in your district think about you. And so that shows you can be so much more famous than, Alex Borez or Michael Lasher, who you guys have probably never heard of. But it doesn't matter, because it only matters if the people in your district know you and are willing to vote for you. And it's and like that social media fame is not a powerful tool, or as nearly as powerful of a tool in these municipal races. When we're talking about bigger races, it's a very powerful tool, because it allows you to cover ground that you just would not be able to cover. Like if you're running for mayor of New York City, there's 8.5 million people. You're not going to be able to cover that amount of people and interacting with them and making them feel seen and heard without social media. The runner-up in the race, Assembly member Alex Borez, unsuccessfully tried to distinguish himself from Lasher by calling him an establishment pick. The race drew national attention for the high-profile runs of Jack Schlossberg, grandson of President JFK, and George Conway, the former Republican who was previously married to former Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway. And then there's some other races in here that we haven't really talked about on that show, so we don't need to get into that, because now we're just getting a little bit New York City specific. But I thought that was important to take note of. And then let's put this down a little bit. And then, again, as I said, probably the most interesting and surprising of these races was this Darializa Chevalier race. And New York Times did put an article out today kind of answering my question, who the fuck is this person? Beyond what I already looked into, because I think they were like, a lot of other people probably going to be answering or asking the same question. And I'm just switching browsers here so that I'm logged in. Hi, Alfred. Are you making an appearance? This is your appearance? This is the time in the show when you say, I want snacks and it's been taking too long. Don't worry. We're almost done, baby bear. Okay, so this is from the New York Times. Who is Darializa Avila Chevalier? Ms. Avila Chevalier pulled off one of the biggest upsets in a New York House primary since Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defeated Joseph Crowley in 2018. Darializa Avila Chevalier, 32, who stunned the Democratic political establishment by upsetting Representative Adriano Espaillat, is a relative political newcomer who emerged from the world of far-left activism. Her campaign was buoyed by strong support from Mayor Zohran Mamdani over the closing stretch. The mayor had originally pledged to endorse her opponent, the incumbent, Representative Adriano Espaillat. But Ms. Avila Chevalier and Mr. Mamdani, both young Democratic socialists, had enough in common that the mayor backtracked on his vow to back Mr. Espaillat. Yeah, backtracked, or was bullied and given an ultimatum by the DSA, whatever. Some of Ms. Avila Chevalier's views may be considered too extreme for mainstream politics and should be chosen to should she be chosen to represent Upper Manhattan in Congress, her views could pose a challenge for the greater Democratic Party. In an interview last week with the New York editorial board, a Substack, Ms. Avila Chevalier repeatedly avoided answering whether she would send a man who randomly killed another man to prison. Here are 5 things to know about Ms. Avila Chevalier. Number 1, she's a first-time candidate. Ms. Avila Chevalier entered the race as an organizer looking to capitalize on the youthful energy that Mr. Mamdani injected into city politics with his win in November. Mr. Mamdani overwhelmingly carried the 13th district, covering large sections of Harlem and Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan in the Democratic mayoral primary and the general election. Ms. Avila Chevalier joined a wave of progressive challengers to establishment incumbents. This campaign was her first formal foray into politics. She is a PhD student and an investigator in a public defender office, while she previously helped lead protests against the, you guessed it, Israel-Hamas war at Columbia University. 2, she was strongly backed by the Democratic Socialists. Ms. Avila Chevalier received crucial support from the DSA, New York City chapter, which sought to help her expand the organization's reach into Upper Manhattan, where its leaders say they have seen the most new membership growth this year. And as we talked about before, for these district-wide races, field, which is people who are ringing your bell and knocking on your door and canvassing at subway stations, is the big, that's the biggest effect on voter turnout and who you're voting for. And so when the DSA backs you, you have access to all of their volunteers, and there are a lot of them, and that is invaluable. It's invaluable, not that you, number 1, that you have the access to that many volunteers, and number 2, invaluable that you have access to that many volunteers for free, right? Ms. Avila Chevalier was a more left-wing candidate than her opponent, having voiced support for abolishing the police, borders, and prisons, and seizing property from landlords. She was also supported by Justice Democrats, a left-wing group which recruited her to run. Again, support of some kind of an organization that is built to do this. The group funneled close to $300,000 to Ms. Avila Chevalier's campaign and was an influential supporter of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's 2018 campaign. 3, she was involved in protests at Columbia. Ms. Avila Chevalier attended Columbia University also where Zohran Mamdani's dad is a professor, and organized with the school's Students for Justice in Palestine group. The university's activists later faced a great deal of scrutiny following the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks in Israel, as the school descended into months-long protests, largely in support of the Palestinian cause. Mahmoud Khalil, the activist who has been targeted by the Trump administration for his organizing, protested alongside her, and he was featured in one of the advertisements supporting her with his wife, Noor. According to City and State New York, Ms. Avila Chevalier attended a pro-Palestinian rally in Times Square on October 8th, 2023. The event was condemned by local leaders, including Brad Lander and Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, for rhetoric that suggested the attacks on October 7th were justified. Quote, "I can only say I have been advocating for the human rights of Palestinians for my adult life," Ms. Avila Chevalier told the outlet. And as a reminder, support for Palestine, for freeing Palestine, is one of the core tenets of the DSA. 4, she was the target of racist attacks. This is what we talked about at the top. This was so stupid from the incumbent's campaign. And again, I can't necessarily say he was like completely behind it. Like some of it was like, you know, you can't control what your supporters do. Sometimes they go rogue, but this was so stupid. Over the course of Ms. Avila Chevalier's campaign, she faced racist attacks questioning her fidelity to her Dominican heritage. Ms. Avila Chevalier's parents are both immigrants from the DR, but some supporters of Mr. Espaillat, the first Dominican American elected to Congress, falsely claimed that she is of Haitian descent. So again, like didn't we learn from like Barack Obama, like questioning someone's like background? Like it just doesn't work. It's a bad look for who's ever saying it. The Dominican Republic and Haiti share the island of Hispaniola and have a long and complicated history marked by an occupation of the entire island by the Haitians and a massacre of Haitians by Rafael Trujillo, who was the Dominican dictator for decades. Miss Avila Chevalier abruptly left an interview on La Mega 97.9, a popular Spanish language radio station, on Tuesday after the hosts accused her of insulting the Dominican flag for refusing to include it in her social media bio because she said Dominican nationalism was violent. 5, her social media post caused a firestorm. Ms. Avila Chevalier faced increasing scrutiny towards the end of her campaign, especially when it came to social media posts she had deleted, but that had been archived on the internet. Between 2018 and 2022, she posted frequently and sometimes used profane language. We're just going to see that more when younger people are getting into office. Like, fuck it. To criticize the Democratic Party, the reported origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, and interracial relationships. Mr. Espaillat pounced on the post with multiple super PACs behind him, running ads highlighting some of her more colorful points. And again, he's older, she's younger. Like those kind of attacks are just are going to make you kind of look like, okay, boomer, I think. For example, one featured a post from 2021 in which Ms. Avila Chevalier lashed out against Kamala Harris, then the vice president, quote, saying, "I have no nuance to add," she wrote, expletive, you know, Kamala, she said, fuck Kamala Harris. She also, which is fine. We say fuck Donald Trump all the time. I guess they're saying like, we don't want someone, you know, being a Democrat in Congress who's saying fuck Kamala Harris. But I think a lot of people think fuck Kamala Harris. I don't think fuck Kamala Harris, but I think like fuck Kamala Harris's campaign, perhaps, you know, it fucked us over. She also called Joe Biden a rapist, which, you know, is very normal for anyone on the far left. That was like not that particularly unique to her. In April 2020, as he was on his way to clinching the Democratic nomination for the presidency, though she recently said she voted for him. I guess we'll never know. Mr. Mamdani said he was unaware of Ms. Avila Chevalier's social media posts at the time of his endorsement, but he did not disavow them. All right. So again, like, so we'll see, like, you know, Zohran, I think really has been pretty good at like towing the line between who he really is, which I think is closer to who Darializa is publicly, and who he, you know, and how he is perceived and his public image. Right. And so, you know, we'll see if she's able to navigate that, or if she's even interested in that, or if she's someone who's being like, you know, I don't necessarily need to be a politician all my life. I want to be true to who I am. And I want to go in hard left and see if I am, you know, well received. And I think that there are definitely other people in Congress who are going to really support her, like, you know, members of the squad. I think I kind of feel that she'll probably be added to the squad. And, you know, we'll see how that goes. All right, we'll wrap up with a little bit of, you know, could be worse. Our kind of girl today, just organically, is really all could be worse, as there was a lot of like little national stories that were coming up that I think were interesting. You know, number one being that the Gaza and genocide does, the genocide in Gaza does continue, but as many outlets thought would happen, it kind of has stopped being a headline. Although, you know, just because that stops being a headline, it has not stopped being something that is a deciding factor in elections. So like, if this is something that's like your number one thing, like it has, we have a very short attention span, in this country, but probably everywhere because of this like constant news cycle that we're in. But I think more than almost anything else I've heard of in recent times, this has kind of stayed at the forefront of many political campaigns. And, outlets probably aren't running consistent stories on it anymore, because I'm guessing because clicks went down, right? Because by now, people have made their decision. So if now in June of 2026, you think it's a genocide, you're always going to think it's a genocide. And if you don't think it's a genocide, you're probably never going to think it's a genocide. And that's why the clicks stopped. That's my looking at it from like a capitalistic point of view. But, this
looking at it from a capitalistic point of view in the sense that the all of the establishment media has been bought up by far right-wing tech billionaires.
Every single one. Well, I know you. I mean, obviously, free press. She's not a tech billionaire though.
Who?
Barry Weiss.
Barry Weiss doesn't own CBS. The Ellisons do, who are right-wing tech billionaires.
I said free press. She does own the free press.
Sure. No, the free press got bought in the the deal. So that go on down.
Formerly,
the line.
Yes. When it went MAGA.
Until they sold out to a right-wing tech billionaire, like everyone in media seems to have done. Like, go on down the list. What's the remaining liberal, quote unquote, fake news, legacy media, however you want to put it?
I mean, NPR, I think, is still pretty trustworthy. I NPR is like kind of my favorite to go to. Let's see who, because it's nonprofit media organization, so it's structured and governed differently. It's literally a registered 501c3, and like that's one that I go to regularly. And even there, and like I'm really far on the left with some stuff. Like I'm talking about social media posts. I'm talking about like Democracy Now! I'm talking about like all of them have stopped talking about it at the length they were. Like there was a time when like that was all that was on my timeline, and it's just not so anymore. I mean, and there was a lot of reasons for that. I think ICE took up a lot of that space. And then obviously, like when we get into primaries, a lot of candidates took up that space, but they were candidates who were going to, back the Palestinians for sure. And so United Nations released, like, what's today, the 24th. So yesterday, this article, it says Israel continues to commit genocide, atrocity crimes by deliberately targeting Palestinian children. UN Independent Commission finds. And this is specific, it says Israeli authorities and security forces have deliberately targeted Palestinian children, resulting in genocide and atrocity crimes in the Gaza Strip and war crimes in the West Bank. A UN Independent Commission of Inquiry said in its latest report released on Tuesday. And now this report was picked up a couple places, but this is like the origin of this report, right? So the evidence shows that Palestinian children have been deliberately targeted and killed by the Israeli security forces, said Srinivasan Muralhaldar, chair of the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestine Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. The report refers to the period following Hamas's invasion of Israel in late 2023, which resulted in 1,200 deaths and 250 taken hostages, and the subsequent war Israel waged against Gaza. That has to date killed more than 70,000 Palestinians in the besieged and occupied territory. Even after the October 2025 ceasefire, children continue to be killed and seriously injured, with continued disregard by Israel for the ceasefire and for the protection owed to Palestinian children under international law. And it says, like, so read the full report here. Let's see. And the commission reiterates that the deliberate targeting of children is one of the key elements establishing genocidal intent of the Israel authorities and security forces to destroy the Palestinian group in whole or in part in Gaza. Severe physical and mental injuries, mass trauma, orphanhood, separation, disability, repeated displacement, starvation, and the collapse of education and healthcare have erased childhood and will continue to affect children in Gaza throughout their lives. I mean, definitely causing generational trauma, which, lives in our DNA. Palestinian children have been arrested and subjected to torture and other severe forms of mistreatment in Israeli prisons and detention facilities with no information on their whereabouts. Israeli security forces have also used sexual violence against children as part of the collective shaming and oppression entrenched within a prolonged ethnic, gendered, and intergenerational pattern of Israeli occupation and hostilities. Israel's targeting of neonatal and maternity care centers in Gaza have directly harmed the survival of newborns and Palestinians' reproductive future, including rises in miscarriages, birth defects, and lasting vulnerabilities among newborns, resulting in the destruction of Palestinian newborn life and the population's continuity, and starvation, dismantling and destruction of orphanages, psychological harm that the Palestinian children have suffered, being stripped of any sense of safety, the stripping of the protection or care, just weakening their society as a whole. I mean, there's a whole report, but those are the kind of things that it goes on, and specifically saying that, when you are targeting children, like that is one of the signs that you are purposely, obviously trying to commit genocide, because there's really no reason other than that than to like stop a population from continuing. Let's see. In Bolivia.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was going to say I have a fun genocide story.
What's a fun genocide story?
So there is a colony of ants who, like, this is like big ant news that came out this week.
This is your Cuties Corner.
This is my Cuties Corner. Sure. Yeah. So there's like a colony of ants who they're much tinier. So this like bigger bully group of ants comes in, grabs the young, brings them back to their colony, and essentially just breeds them, like raises them to be slaves for the colony.
Whoa. Ants are so smart.
Right. Now, the slave ants have started revolting because they're able to discern between the children of like their own children that are being brought in as slaves versus the children of the slave master ants, let's say. So they've started killing their children, wiping out the next generation. The current generation is so dependent upon the slave labor of those ants, they can't get rid of them. So they're just accepting that their next generation is being killed by the slaves that are, keeping their population alive right now. And while it's not going to get them free, it will give the other ants who are, free outside of the colony a much better chance of survival. Right. If we weaken them to the point where they can't send out scouts to steal our young,
to get more slaves. Yeah.
Helping the elonging of our species, despite the fact that we will live in bondage for our entire ant lives. I thought that was super interesting.
That is very interesting. Where'd you read about that? A tweet.
Yeah, Corinne, do you think I read it? No, it was like a 5.5 minute long reel. So that almost counts as an article.
What? Okay,
but no, wait. It cited science articles in it.
Is like, did they say this was new?
Yeah, they said that this guy was like, look, there's a war going on in the ant colonies, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. Let's see what you got. And then he broke it down. I was like, this is super interesting.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think it seems like this has like been happening for a while. Like I see something like from National Geographic from 2009, the rebellion of the ant slaves, which seems to result back in that. But I mean, interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I might have just gotten.
I don't think it's new though.
Somebody who told that story in a fascinating way and was like, "Hey, this thing exists."
Well, no, I think this is really common, right? So it's like, obviously online we have misinformation, we have propaganda, but we also a lot of times have things that are presented as if they're breaking and are true, as this story seems to be. Like I'm seeing sources for this. Fine. So what you got is not misinformation. It's just old information that is is presented as new because it's interesting. So like that's the only thing. It's like, okay, what's the timeline here? But then also like there is like a Science Direct article from February 21st, 2026 that says kidnapped, brainwashed, enslaved, the animal that steals, and this looks like to be that it's about ants too. That steals the young and forces them to work. So like it seems like it is something that maybe happens periodically in the ant world. And I didn't know about that. So it's very interesting. And yeah, Discover Wildlife is writing about it in 2026. So there you go. Very interesting. All right, let's then quickly just in regards to Bolivia, I know you were sitting at home being like, what's happening in Bolivia? Bolivia this week has declared a state of emergency because there's so many protests happening to demand the resignation of its president, Rodrigo Paz. The move would give Paz broader powers to clear roadblocks by demonstrators. Like if the state of emergency will give him these powers to clear roadblocks by demonstrators, which have caused serious shortages of basic goods and paralyzed large parts of the nation. So again, just kind of going through little blips of things that are happening worldwide. In Colombia, this is from The Guardian, Colombia's left-wing candidate concedes the election to a Trump-endorsed millionaire. Leftist Iván Cepeda conceded to far-right lawyer Alvarado de la Espriella, who won by a razor-thin margin. And we'll see how that ties into America going forward and what Donald Trump's Colombian plans are. Donald Trump endorsed de la Espriella while describing Cepeda, who conceded, as a radical left Marxist. People are saying we denounce the open and improper foreign interference in Colombia's internal affairs, in particular the interventions carried out by the government of the United States, and especially those of President Donald Trump, in favor of Alvarado de la Espriella's candidacy. So that's interesting. We're getting involved in other nations' elections. That's fun. And then also talking about us meddling in foreign affairs. This is from Democracy Now! Under intense U.S. pressure, Cuban lawmakers approve sweeping economic changes. And we'll close on this. In news from Cuba, lawmakers have passed sweeping economic changes that could lead to the privatization of much of Cuba's socialist economy. The move comes after intense U.S. pressure and threats by President Trump to take over Cuba. In recent months, the U.S. has blocked nearly all oil shipments from reaching Cuba. This on top of the U.S. embargo that dates back to the early 1960s. Cuba's Prime Minister Manuel Marrero Cruz spoke on Thursday, and he said these are proposals to confront the crisis, opening a transformative window that, if not implemented now, could bring irreversible political and social consequences. But I want to reiterate that these transformations do not represent a departure from the socialist project. On the contrary, they follow the logic of its own development. In other news from Cuba, former Vice President Ramiro Valdez Menendez has died at the age of 94. He was a close ally of Fidel and Raul Castro and was a key figure in the Cuban Revolution. So just to give you a little sense of what's going on around the nation. Also, there was not an article that was more than really stats heavy, but I always look up new news and domestic violence and like femicide and stuff like that. And Massachusetts, if you're on the ground in Massachusetts and you're listening to this show, Massachusetts has had a 20% rise in it's homicide, I think, is involved, but it's also like in DV and DV related homicide. So I don't know what's in the water in Massachusetts. I don't know if your sports teams are not doing well or something. And it's, because I'm not even joking. Domestic violence rises when sports teams in that city are doing poorly. But if you want to volunteer your time, that's definitely something that needs attention and love and eyes and voices happening in Massachusetts specifically, because I thought that report was pretty alarming. 20% And I think this is like, it was either since 2024 or 2025, like a 20% rise in like DV related incidents and deaths. That's a lot in a short period of time. So wanted to bring your attention to that. But that's our show for today. Thank you so much to all my Patreon subscribers. A shout out to Christopher Fungi, our amazing dictator, my capitalist pigs, and my cuties. If you want to help support the show and all the work we do here, head on over to patreon.com/withoutatcountry. And if you don't have any extra bucks in your bag, I totally hear you. Times are tough, but just go over to the YouTube and press subscribe on Without a Country. Those numbers are so helpful. You can also click follow on the Without a Country Instagram. I'm going to try to do like more specific stuff that I only put on there that I don't put on my main account to, so there's a specific reason for you to be following that. And also, so I don't have politics undoing my comedy algorithm. It's all very, it's boring, but I'm just giving you a little behind the scenes. And of course, continue saving that date, Sunday, October 25th for the Comedy Store. Gash is there. Mike, what and how can people support you?
Well, if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, it is at the M Harrington. If you'd like me talking about UFC at any point during this, I do that pretty regularly. So hit me up in the DMs. Give me your fight picks for this week in any card. Coming up, I have the Armored League at Melrose Ballroom, July 23rd. It's going to be the big boys. Everyone is 215 and up. You can get your tickets at thearmoredleague.com.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this episode interesting. If you want to send me either additional information, if you're familiar with that DSA candidate in Denver, Milat, if you want to have anything additional to add to any of the stories we went over today or present a news story, please send it to me at withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. And until then, keep citing your sources, thinking critically, and having conversations without, blocking people on Instagram. It's nice. It's calming. It feels good. I'll talk to you next week. Bye. Peace.
Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive.